Services City Council. Roger, please.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Welcome to this meeting of Dundee City Council, which is being held remotely in terms of Section 43 of the Local Governance in Scotland Act 2003. All members in attendance are able to fully participate in the meeting, which is being recorded. Should any member need to leave the meeting for any reason, can they please use the chat to advise of this? If a member loses their connection, they should make every effort to rejoin the meeting, but if this is not possible, the Committee Services Officer will note their absence for the remainder of the meeting. If you have to leave the meeting due to a declaration of interest, you must remain out of the meeting until invited back in. Would all members please mute their microphones when not speaking to avoid background noise and turn off any smart speakers. Please start the meeting with your camera on. Your face will appear on the screen when you are speaking. If your connection is poor, you may wish to turn off your camera and see if this improves matters. If this doesn't help, you may wish to quickly leave the meeting and rejoin. If you wish to raise a point of order, ask a question, speak on any item or move a motion or amendment, please use the chat when the relevant item is called. The convener will then invite you to speak. Would members of the press and public please not post messages in the chat? Where items are for noting or where there has been no disagreement expressed, the convener will call for any member who has a contrary view to indicate this through the chat, otherwise the item will be agreed. Please would members not use the chat for any other purposes, as those joining the meeting by telephone cannot see the chat and therefore will not be able to follow the debate. Although we are operating in a different way, this is still a formal meeting of the Council, and the required standards of behaviour and discussion are the same as in a face-to-face meeting. Standing orders will apply to the proceedings, and the terms of the Councillors' Code of Conduct will also apply in the normal way. Does any member have any queries regarding this procedure? There are no queries, Lord Provost, so I'll now ask the Committee Services Officer to take a roll call for the minute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now take a roll call for the minute and would ask if members would confirm they are present when I call their name. Lord Provost.
Present.
Councillor Alexander.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Present.
Thank you. Deputy Lord Provost Cardell.
Present.
Bailey Dawson.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Nakla. Councillor Nakla. You'll mark them as absent. Present.
Sorry,
Councillor
apologies, Willie.
She's on the screen.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Flynn.
Good evening, I'm here.
Good. Councillor Hunter.
Good evening, I'm here.
Councillor Lynn.
Present.
Bailey Roberts.
Good evening, I'm here.
Councillor Rome.
Good evening, I'm here.
Bailey Soares.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Short.
I'm here.
Good. Councillor Smith.
I'm here.
Councillor Toland.
Hi, yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Bailey Keenan.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Cruikshank.
Present.
Councillor Finnegan.
Apologies in.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll note our apologies. Councillor McHugh.
Present.
Councillor McIrvin.
Present.
Councillor Malone.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Scullen.
Evening, present.
Okay, Councillor Shears.
Present.
Bailey Wright.
Present.
Bailey McPherson.
Good evening, present.
Councillor Coleman.
Good evening.
Thank you. Councillor Crichton.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan.
Here.
Bailey Scott.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I was here the whole time. I just thought everyone was being super quiet, but my computer was on mute, so apologies. And I'm here.
Thank you, Councillor Wanakala. I've noted you being as present.
Thank
That
you.
concludes the roll call.
Lord Provost, members of the Council, there is one item of business for the City Council this evening, the minutes for information and record purposes.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? I'm not seeing anything. Is this agreed? I'll take that as agreed. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Roger. That's City Council.
Thank you, Lord Provost. The next committee this evening is the Community Safety and Public Protection Committee.
Good evening, and we'll get started because it looks like it's going to be quite a long evening.
Thank you, Convener. Item 1, Declaration of Interest. Are there any declarations?
I'm not seeing any hands, and I don't see anything in the chats just now, so we'll take
Thank
that
you.
as nobody.
Thanks. We'll move to item 2, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Quarterly Performance Report from the 1st of January to the 31st of March 2023.
Jason, do you want to take us through some of this? I've just seen Lynn's put an item for a motion on number 2 as well. Jason.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I trust everyone's had an opportunity to review our scrutiny report. As I think we mentioned last time, Group Commander Robertson's put some time in reviewing the approach within the report to help focus this thing. Again, in particular, Paul will bring the community safety work to your attention that we've been working through in that quarter, and especially the work that was done with partners within the schools over that period as well. Also, you'll be aware in the motions that put aside that there's a recent announcement by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service that we're making temporary and permanent changes to our establishment. Not less, but noticed by yourselves with firefighters' presence in the city today. Convener, as you're aware, Paul has organised 2 Dundee focused briefing sessions for midweek, where we will go through the changes in detail, rationale and process, and answer any questions. I would really welcome the opportunity today to give you an overview of what the local changes are, but give you some assurance that we've written to Chief Executives, communicated with local elected members through yourself, and hopefully that's been a sufficient overview. We've put some further information together for MSPs today, and I was hoping to provide an overview today. I'm just looking for counsel if you'd like me to deliver that now or after Paul's delivered on the scrutiny report.
Well, I'm seeing Lynn saying that she has a motion. So do we want to hear that motion first? I'm not seeing NG saying no. So Lynn, do you want to do your motion first?
Convener, can I just come in here on a point of order in terms of standing orders? Questions first, points thereafter. So questions before we reach anything to do with motions. Thank you.
Right, okay. Jason wants to take us through the report first then. That way the questions will be relevant to the report, right, Jason?
Thank you very much. In that case, I'll hand over to Paul to lead us through the report and answer any questions between us once he's completed. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Bill Roberts. I know that you've all had the opportunity to look through the report. What I will do is I'll take you through the performance highlights, which will put a bit of context to the performance summary. And then, as Jason has said, I'll focus on the performance management and the good work of the community action team and firefighters and what we're planning on doing going forward to further enhance our performance. So if I can direct the committee to page 12 of your meeting pack, and this is in relation to the performance summary on page 11. So priority 1, improving fire safety in the home. The number of accidental dwelling fires and indeed the non-fatal fire casualties happily is down in both areas, and it shows that trend not just in the quarter but also in the 3-year trend for both of those. When I've dug into the actual detail of these incidents over the quarter, they're mostly cooking related, with limited damage and limited action required by firefighters on arrival, and that's partly down to fire detection being present in most of these premises. Priority 2, improving fire safety and resilience in the business community. So Q4 seen an increase in non-domestic building fires, despite the fact that is actually a lower figure than last year, and it pushed our total number just above the target set for the year. However, fire damage was low impact at most of these incidents, again with limited action required by fire crews, and that's reflected in the 0 fatal and non-fatal casualties for Q4, and again fire alarm systems being present in all of those properties. Priority 3, minimising the impact of unintentional harm. So over the quarter there were 7 RTC or road traffic collision incidents that SFRS attended. This is lower than last year and the 3-year average, but unfortunately again it takes us just above the number that we set for the year. These incidents did not require, so none of these incidents required firefighters to extricate, that is, cut people out of cars, and I'll go into more detail on that within the performance management. And there were only 2 persons that required any kind of hospital treatment out of the actual casualties reported. With priority 4, reducing unwanted fire alarm signals, there were 348 UFAS incidents over Q4. We've got to be mindful of the fact that that's 348 incidents with in some cases multiple appliances attending, and these incidents were due to cooking, accidental activation due to contaminants or human behaviour, and I'll go into more detail in the performance management. Priority number 5, which is reducing deliberate fires. Unfortunately, we've seen again 24 deliberate primary fires in Q4. It is a reduction on Q3, but again the overall number for the year has exceeded the target. The number of deliberate secondary fires in Q4 was 157. It's actually lower than the same quarter over the last 2 years, but again it's taken us over the target set for the year. And as I've noted there's details on the reduction strategy for both incident types in page 17, which I'll go over, and within Appendix 1 at the back of the report. I'll cover priority 6 when we get there for performance management. So performance management for priority 1, I would direct you to page 14 of the meeting pack. So over the quarter, firefighters and CAT team conducted and completed 1,088 home fire safety visits, with 526 of those being directed and targeted into high-risk homes. The Dundee CAT team have also carried out visits in partnership with Dundee City Council, with refugees and social work department, partnering supporting high-risk vulnerable people across the city. Also, as a result of the fire fatality review, the Dundee CAT team continue to deliver the risk recognition inputs and benefits of home fire safety referrals to carers and housing associations. So that's effectively our CAT team speaking to colleagues and partners who are in people's homes that can identify the early signs and lead to a home fire safety visit and hopefully a prevention strategy. Priority 2, page 16 of the meeting report. Dedicated fire safety enforcement officers continue to audit relevant premises that fall within the scope of the Fire Scotland Act to ensure compliance. During Q4, a total of 54 premises were inspected that fall within the scope of the Act. The breakdowns within the report. Of those, 4 were post-fire audits across a range, including prison fire, fire in a school, fire in a shop, and a fire in a takeaway restaurant. There were no patterns or trends identified within that, and the legislative fire safety teams provided support and guidance to the duty holders to improve the fire safety in those areas. The engagement with duty holders has been ongoing ahead of the UFAS time for change. I've included a link within the report for committee members that you follow that link, and that gives you the full detail on that work that's ongoing ahead of the 1st of July. Ongoing work with Dundee City Council to consult with the support, the licensing of short-term lets throughout the city is established and underway. I would draw your attention to the bit at the bottom of the performance management, which says 30% of HMO licenses have been completed. I've clarified on that one because that 30% sounds relatively low, but Legislative Fire Safety have informed me that is actually the upper end of what we need to do as a service, and so we've actually, if you like, we've completed 100% of what we would be expected to do within the year. Priority 3, 18 on the meeting report. So this is in relation to the RTC, or road traffic collision activity. As I mentioned earlier, 0 extrications required by firefighters. There were 47 incidents, with 7 incidents where occupants required to be released by firefighters using hydraulic tools. So that indicates to us that the trend is that these are low impact collisions in the main, resulting in low injury numbers. 13 occupants being removed to hospital, with 11 of those classed as minor injuries. No trends or areas identified within the road network by ourselves to give us any concerns. RTC training is a core competency, which I'll cover under number 6. That skill is maintained by operational crews to ensure safe, quick delivery of casualties to definitive care where required. This has been enhanced by the provision of fully battery-powered equipment across the fleet of appliances within Dundee City, and that is actually a better provision of equipment than we had previously. It means that we're carrying hydraulic rescue equipment on all appliances across Dundee City now. That equipment is also safer to use and quicker to get to work, so better for firefighters and better for casualties trapped within. Our CAT team are engaged with colleagues in Police Scotland to look at enhancing the educational initiatives, and we are looking to support Police Scotland with the new driver scheme. We are currently running a trial with our staff in Police Scotland and Scottish Ambulance Service within Perth and Kinross, and we're hoping to roll it out to schools within City of Dundee later on this year. Priority 4, page 20 on the report. So as I mentioned earlier, we were called out to 348 UFAS incidents within the City of Dundee over the quarter. That's an increase on the same quarter last year, with the total number of UFAS for the year 1,332. I've listed, as we always do, the top types of residents, and what we draw your attention to is that student halls of residence, hospitals and medical care, and then the one at the bottom of the table there, residential care homes, they will not be affected by the UFAS reduction because there's a sleeping risk, and as you'll all be aware, SFRS will still attend sleeping risk premises after the 1st of July. I've put some more information in there with regards UFAS, and again I've put the link in should you want to follow that link and see the detail of the seminars that have been put on for business owners. Priority 5 is reducing deliberate fires. That's on page 22 of the meeting pack. So Dundee CAT team have worked with internal and external partners both proactively and in a reactive way to drive down incidents of this type. Areas where repeated incidents have occurred were targeted by carrying out environmental visual audits at Millamains Primary School as a result of a number of fires within the school grounds. Also at the derelict building risk information that's been communicated, gathered by the team and partners at Dundee City Council, Police Scotland, has been pushed out not only to frontline fire service crews, but also partners to identify risks within buildings of that type. There's been some really good work done in that area. There's more within Appendix 1 on applying pressure on owners of these buildings to make them safe and develop them as soon as possible. Dundee CAT are also working with operational watches to reduce the number of deliberate fires set, which has resulted in leaflets being dropped around the areas and information being shared with Police Scotland and community wardens to ask for passing attention in the areas where we've seen a spike in activity. Dundee CAT also launched and completed just recently the Dundee Schools competition. I know that members on the call will have attended that. Really positive story. And I've had news today that we're looking to not only do that next year, but also extend it to all of the schools within Dundee. Really positive news, really well received by the pupils involved and others that attended. More details in Appendix 1. So Dundee CAT have also carried out a number of fire safety support and education inputs aimed at youths who have been charged in connection with willful fire reasons. So again, trying to educate offenders and get across impact of actions like that. And again, just an update that's not within the report through engagement today. The CAT team are looking to reinvigorate safe Taysiders either later on this year or next year, and also details within Appendix 1 of a work experience programme to further extend that educational part. So priority 6 is our training part. Without going into the full detail, you'll see I've listed there the various range of everything that the firefighters locally have been training on, everything there from knots and lines, which is probably one of the most basic skills that a firefighter will pick up, all the way through to cyber security. As always, home fire safety visits are relevant with operational crews assisting the CAT team in getting out to those properties that are high risk, medium and low risk. Operational intelligence gathering, both in relation to new businesses and indeed revisiting of various premises across the city. I've also noted a couple of partnership exercises that were there. The top one, exercise Ashgrove, really highlights where we are as a national service and how we can utilise through the use of ICT, utilising national assets without them actually having to be on scene through ICT connectivity. And exercise Thomas, which was a multi-agency exercise that took place out at Montrose, but was supported by local flexi duty managers from this area and indeed McAlpine Road. That's the report. Bailey Roberts, I'd be happy to take questions.
I'll make a comment before that. I was one of the ones that attended the young people undertaking firefighter duties as a competition. It was absolutely amazing. Lynn was very brave and sat in a car with fire and smoke around her. And the young people saved her 4 times. She come out smiling every time, so it was fine. So we'll start with a question from Councillor Duncan. Craig.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Just firstly to say to the fire officers, thanks for the really good presentation of a comprehensive report, and there's a lot of positive stuff in there. So, and also for delivering it to us in a timely fashion so that we can digest it before committee. So thanks indeed for that. I've got a question, and also, if it's okay, convener, or follow up one after that. But my question really is, we're all aware of the recent in my view, quite concerning news of what we're told is the temporary removal of 10 appliances and a reduction in the number of high reach appliances deployed from 26 to 16. Now, the letter from Jason Sharp, indeed, to the Chief Executive of the 2nd of June said, and I quote, "These changes are the least impactful in both a local and national context and will not compromise community safety," end quote. It really, in my view, it rather begs the question then that if that's the case, and this significant reduction in the number of appliances is actually not harmful, one, why were all these appliances needed in the first place is a fairly obvious one. Second, if they were needed, should we not actually be concerned about them being removed?
Thanks, Councillor. If it's okay, I'll respond to that. No, I think thank you for your compliment on the work that Paul's did and his team pulling this report together. And for referring to the letter that we issued. For us, I think what I'd like to do midweek is get through and present to you the level of detail and how we've assessed that. For us as a national service, we can support the Dundee area with appliances out with the area if we've mobilised the instance. What the level of detail to look to get into when I meet with you is due to the global pandemic, we experienced issues in recruiting and retaining staff, in particular doing spirometry assessments for medicals. There was quite a challenge through that, which we haven't recovered from our crewing levels. Also, we had changed our pensions last year, which meant we had a massive leaver profile spike that we hadn't prepared for within our recruitment portfolio. So we have unfortunately been running short crewed since the pandemic initiated till now. So quite commonly within our area, we can run an appliance short, which is a short-term notice. So I think that's the analysis that we used to get to that conclusion on a short-term temporary crewing reduction, whilst we have a number of programmes looking to assess further information to make recommendation moving forward into next year and the year after. So without going into too much detail, Councillor, it's a really excellent question. I think I'd like to get into a more detailed discussion of that later in the week, where I could be cross-examined on that.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Sharp, and I do appreciate that, tonight's not the night for fulsome detail, and I certainly do look forward to these briefings. I think you will appreciate that certainly at face value, the layman, the public, will be somewhat concerned and perplexed by this proposal. And I have to say that our group on the council was certainly of the view that this is probably a direct impact of the negative consequences of continual flat cash settlements from the Scottish Government. Indeed, your letter actually highlights flat cash settlements budgets, and I think that's an issue that the Scottish Government needs to urgently address. Thank you.
The meetings, if you haven't already noticed, are on the 14th at noon and the 15th at 5 o'clock. So if you could book into one of those, you get a chance to ask questions of the team yet again. So Michael, you're next.
Thank you, Convener. Just a quick one on page 19, where unwanted fire alarms. I note that unwanted fire alarm signals problem in terms of incidents kind of remains stubbornly high, and I can just therefore ask what engagement is being done with educational institutions to kind of get this number down.
Thanks, Michael. So the engagement is at the point of when we're called out. So the operational crews will take the opportunity to educate at that point. Also, we're proactive through, again, the CAT team and operational crews. We look to get in at things like Freshers Week, to educate on accidental activations, because we do get a number of accidental activations, but we also unfortunately get a number of deliberate activations, which obviously pool our resources into those situations, and they cannot be released obviously until such times as we're assured that it is a false alarm. So yeah, I've spoke with the CAT team about how we can up that activity, and they're certainly up for engaging across both Abertay campus and Dundee University campus to try and push that information out and educate. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
And next we've got a question from George.
Thanks, Chair. My question is relates to page 23, priority 6, and we speak about effective risk management and operational preparedness. And it's also mindful. I appreciate the briefings during the course of this week. However, this is public scrutiny, so the public do have they should know what's happening to their service, their public service in fire and rescue. So I hope I do get answers to the couple of two-part questions that I've got, because on the back of Scottish Government cuts of 11 million for this financial year, and we're looking at the next 4 years at over £40 million being taken out of fire and rescue. I find it difficult to believe that a temporary measure will be temporary. I would suggest that it will be permanent. And that's against a backdrop of losing 1,100 skilled staff throughout Scotland since centralisation. So there's big concerns here, similar to Police Scotland as well. We've seen emergency services over the years being funding slashed and losing staff, highly skilled staff. So my question for Jason is, so you're looking at the impact of losing one appliance. What is the risk assessment fire and rescue have placed on losing one appliance in Dundee, and what could the Dundee people expect of the service moving forward? And the second part of the question is, will this lead to a reduction in operational firefighters by losing this one appliance in Dundee?
Thanks, Councillor. Quite a lot of kind of information in there, and I think certainly I'll give it my best to answer the now, and certainly we can tease more of that out during the week, but please feel free to clarify if I've missed anything. So you're absolutely correct on the money that you're stating there. Is quite a significant backdrop we've got there, and it's, as stated in the letter I went out, it's a reminder for the Chief Fire Officer presenting to the Justice Committee last November around the financial challenges presented by that resource and spending review in regard to what that impact may look like for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. The Chief Officer was very clear and publicly acknowledging that the budget challenges were likely to affect our operational delivery model. He gave the assurance that any changes would be data-driven based on risk and demand, with community safety being our top priority. As part of that assessment, Councillor, we've looked at a community risk index model, which had been developed by a programme within the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service called the Service Delivery Model Programme. So that's been getting developed since 2019, with a view to review our complete delivery model across Scotland, and that was going to start to be delivered in 2025. However, due to the flat cash settlement, we've had to accelerate some of the thinking around that with some temporary reductions whilst we fully assess our financial envelope over the next 4 years. For me, Councillor, I'm really interested in the figure of 1,100 firefighters and where that number comes from. From my recollection, I've got a different number of firefighters that we've lost since 2011-12. That's a figure of 575. So I'm really happy to pick up offline and discuss that and clarify where my numbers may not align to yours. I'm not sure if I've answered your question fully, Councillor. Is there anything else that you need clarified?
So 1,100's in the public media, and that'll be staff as well, not just operational firefighters. That'll be staff. as well in fire and rescue since centralisation. But the question that I would really like to get asked here is there going to be a reduction in fire crews in Dundee with this appliance going?
So as it stands now, Councillor, there is a temporary reduction to what we call a resource-based crewing level. So within that station, there'll be 4 less firefighters required to crew the assets every day and every night. We will be, it kind of goes back to your point on resilience, Councillor, where we will keep staff in there and keep them fully trained, workforce that's there to ensure that the assets that are in there, which is, you know, critical to our service, we'll make sure they're available at all times. And that station will always be supported by its neighbouring Dundee assets and the wider Scottish Fire and Rescue Service assets.
Okay, thanks.
Dorothy, you've got a question?
Yes, thank you, Christina. I'd like to add my thanks, first of all, for the report. These reports are always clear and easy to read, so thank you to whoever puts them together. I have a question relating to page 21, priority 5. This reports that deliberate primary and secondary fires have increased significantly since 2019. And despite the efforts listed of work with internal and external partners to address the issue, it doesn't appear that there might be an improvement anytime soon. And in priority 6 on page 23, which relates to operational preparedness, bullet point 3 highlights developing flexibility to deploy crews to take on a broadening role within the community. And I have to ask, in light of the worrying increase in deliberate fire setting, does the service have the resources in the right place at the right time to deal effectively with this significant threat to community safety?
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Thank you for the kind comments on the report. I'll take credit for that. To answer the first part of your question, within the report and through, again, fairly recent engagement with our community action team, because they certainly take point on this type of activity, both from a reactive way. They monitor this type of activity on a daily basis, and then they go out and try and drive down any trends, but also proactively. I'll go back to the performance management piece. Now, you quite rightly cite since 2019, and we'll all be aware that for a considerable period of time, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service have not been able to deliver educational initiatives. None of us were able to do anything for that 2 or 3 years, and I would suspect that the increase that we see may well be part of the hangover from that. But please be assured that there is an absolute focus now in driving back to things like safe Taysiders, where we engage directly with a really good programme of educational initiatives for it was delivered to P7s at that time. Operational crews within Dundee City have absolutely been cited on the desire from the PCAD management team about getting back into schools and driving that education, because I believe that is what will see us come out of this and push that trend back the way. And it will not be an overnight success, I'm afraid. However, as we all know, that education will take time, but I'm confident that over the course of time, it will start to push these types of incidents back down. With regards to the second part of your question, I'm assured that we have the right resources in the right place at the right time, and I'm assured that our firefighters, through the training that they do, and because we have the backup of that national resilience, we absolutely are able to respond and deal with any incidents that occur. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Daniel?
Thank you, Madam Convener. If we look at Limerick fire statistics on page 21, we see an increasing trend each year over the past 4 years. And with the 22-23 Q4 figure of the Limerick primary fires at page 127, at 127, that's over twice the target of below 63. Can I ask what additional steps have been taken to get this figure showing a downward trend?
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. I'll relate back.
Looks like Paul's teams might have frozen there, Councillor Coleman. Nope. I think what he was going to say is just what you were saying, Councillor Hugh. I think we've seen a dip in performance due to a number of factors, and I think Paul and I talked through the stats this week, and I've not got any academic evidence to prove this, but I think because we weren't in the communities during the pandemic, it's taken a while for some of these stats to start presenting themselves. I think if you look at some of the preventative work within our appendices, I think there's a range of matters we're doing to engage our community, with both our community action team and also our operational firefighters. But there was, for a period of about 2 years, we weren't deploying our teams into the community. So I think for a business continuity perspective, that recovery point period where we are now deploying our staff as actively as possible with stakeholders to improve that now. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Coleman.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you.
And Bailey Keenan's got his name down as well. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks. Just to tease out a little bit further, the question that my colleague, Councillor McKirwan put, he asked about the number of operational firefighters that would be lost should the appliance go out of Dundee. And you replied that it would be 4, but you're obviously manning it 24/7. So over a sort of monthly period, should that not be much greater than 4? You've obviously double shifted it, and then you've got that shift goes off, rest periods and all the rest of it. So what's the overall figure that we're likely to lose in operational firefighters, whether this temporary moves on the go or not?
Thanks, Councillor, and apologies if I've not given you the right picture there. So that fire station is crewed with 2 appliances currently. The first appliance has got 5 firefighters on it, the second appliance has got 4 firefighters on it. The whole time crewing model runs on a 5-duty system. So it'd be 20 firefighters that we would take off of our crewing level. However, we don't plan on losing 20 firefighters from that station. We will keep what we call a buffer in there for training and absence and resilience within the station. I think, Councillor, what I'm looking to do is give you a full overview of everything that sits within the Dundee and wider area to give you the assurance that we have got adequate cover in the area. However, I have to reaffirm, this is, again, I understand this is cynicism from what this has been put in the meeting. However, it is a temporary change, whilst we as a service look at back office and frontline delivery for making savings next year. So this still remains a temporary change.
Okay, but thanks for clarifying.
Thanks, Councillor.
Mark, you next.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I think I'll touch on the temporary change. I wasn't going to touch on the actual letter that had been put out because I thought you were giving a wee presentation after that. I mean, comment on it, but as there's been a number of questions on this, I think I'll just touch upon this now, if that's okay. You touched upon temporary. So what does temporary mean? First of all, when is it getting reviewed? I think that's the first case. And I think when I go back to the letter, if it's okay, Jason, it says in the second paragraph, changes will be data driven based on risk and demand. The report in front of us, for example, what Councillor Coleman's touched upon, deliberate fires are well out with the target and have been for a few years. Secondary fires are well out with the target. So obviously there's a fire demand, the fire appliance demand within the city. even though you're doing a lot of the CAT stuff, which is really quite impressive, to be honest with you, and I think it's welcomed. And I think that's my concern, that with the presentation of what you're trying to do here, I'm really confused what temporary means within this model, based on what you've just been saying. And I think it's something we really need as a committee to be clear, and hopefully you'll be doing that later this week. But I didn't want to touch upon that later, but others have mentioned it already. So again, and touching upon what your answer to the last question with national resilience. Now, if we have some specialist teams, I understand, on the Kingsway site. So if they were drawn out of the city, we'd then be taking a demand away from the support or the second or the reserve network from possibly Forfar, Brechin, Carray, or whatever they're set out. So we'd be putting other communities at risk. Would that be the case? Because we're losing appliances within the city, we would have to put bigger demand on other localities. So a number of points in there. I'm sure you'll address them during the week, but if you can touch across some of them, that'd be great.
No, thank you. All really pertinent points. I think probably the questions that we'll go into a lot more detail during the week. So the temporary nature is absolutely as we work through the detail. What we've done, like I mentioned earlier, Councillor, the service delivery model programme, which has been established back in 2019, who have been developing that community risk index model, looking at demand, looking at when our peak demand is, etc. But subsequently, due to the flat cash settlement, we've had a need to establish another programme to look at not just our operational model, but the full service we deliver across our nation. So that's now the Strategic Services Review Programme, and that's chaired by the Director of Finance and Director of Operations. So that has just been established. We've now stood up a weekly tactical action group chaired by the Director of Service Delivery, David Farris, and a number of subgroups to absolutely seek to find financial savings everywhere we can, back office before we look at frontline service delivery. The risk in demand, and I think you're absolutely right to identify the increase trend. I think what's worthy of remembering is our operational model has remained largely unchanged since the 70s. And that demand, when you look back that far, which I was still at school right enough, but when you look that far back, it's we had heavy industry in Dundee, jute mills, etc. When I started the job in the 90s, how extremely busy we were with house fires. That's completely changed, but I absolutely get your concerns. So what we've asked for the meetings subsequent in the week, the team that's been working up the risk and demand-based model is coming to speak to our sessions, enable us to look at the kind of data and discuss that as a bunch of professionals.
Can I just come back, convener?
Yep.
Yeah, just say thanks very much for the response, Jason. You never answered the temporary part with regards to what that actually meant, but I'd like to just say that the model, I think when it goes back to data-driven should be local and look at the actual data within the local network, and to remove appliances when we're seeing an increase in the local the numbers you presented to us today is quite a concern. And I think, again, we'll probably address this during the week and with more discussion, but I think I just want to highlight the concern and also what's been touched upon with the possible reduction in numbers of firefighters within the area as well, not just appliances, and the impact of that within the city. Thank you.
And we've got Pete.
Thank you. I'll keep it quick because it's been going on quite a while. Just to draw on the temporary thing, could you give us any estimate of a time frame? We were talking weeks, months, years here, because it is going to be at a time when our city is at extra risk. So even having a ballpark figure would be good. And secondly, I know we have member briefings, but is there any plans for public briefings? Because it's the public that are going to be concerned here. They've heard all about it. It's all well and good us knowing about it, and we'll give out the information as it's requested, but is there any plans for public engagement?
Thanks, Mr. Shears, and I guess that word temporary is what I was hoping to detail today, and we've went into the question, which is fine, is we plan to make the temporary changes across Scotland by the 4th of September. However, we will stay absolutely alive to any change, and continually monitor that through the groups that we've established with the weekly tactical action group and that monthly service review board that's been established. So for us, I don't have an answer to temporary, other than we've got a 4-year programme established to look at financial savings. For anything to become permanent, we'll have to go to full public consultation to achieve that, which touches on your next point, really, which is what we're working up through our communication subgroup as the next stage. So obviously we have been coming to engage with yourselves and go through the detail yourselves this week. However, what we're discussing in the comms group is where that public discussion comes in, Mr. Shears.
Thank you.
And that seems to be the last of the questions. So we'll move to Lynn. Councillor Short.
Thank you, Convener. Veronica, can you please share the motion with everybody at committee, please? Okay, so
I'll do that.
thank you. Thank you, Veronica. As we do that, obviously this has been very much hot off the presses for the last couple of weeks. My phone's been burning hot. I don't know how many of these puns I'm going to get through until I get to the end of this, but there's been a lot of discussions and a lot of conversations going on. And it got me to thinking about Dundee. And Jason, you touched on it a little bit, from the fact that in the past we had jute fires. There was a bond fire where there was whiskey running down the streets of Dundee on fire. And so it's almost built into the DNA of us. And as someone who has been born and brought up in the city, I've always been very fascinated by the work of fire and rescue. And that's gone beyond just my personal life. It's also been part of my professional life. I have worked in the past overseas, and at one point, believe it or not, I assisted the Kitzbühel Fire Brigade by climbing out of a window of a hotel halfway up the Hahnenkamm to help them with their drills. I also did fire risk assessments across hotels in Hamburg, and once we had a bus fire on the Romantic Road. Fires impact and road collisions impact every single society. Personally, I've actually been saved and cut out of a road traffic accident. I've also been told off many a time for my hair straighteners, which have burnt my mattress. And most recently, I worked out because my son did. So you can actually have an air fryer go on fire. These are all things that were kind of plaguing me a little bit, and also the fact that what's going to be happening, it's happening to the Kingsway, and this really hit home on Tuesday night. I was invited by the union to visit the station, and I listened and I learned and had discussions with the teams there, which was very productive. The next night we had our group meeting. I just got home, put the oven on, put the pizza in, looked out the window, and here was an engine. There was an engine because one of the neighbours' little kids' sticks on fire and they put a hedge on fire. So the fire brigade were called. Communities are all around us and the communities need us constantly. Every single person here today, I am sure, wants to stick up for this city and show that this city is our priority. This evening, I have the pleasure of bringing forward this motion on behalf of the Dundee SNP group because we wanted this motion to almost show that Dundee is our priority. And I know that there's been talk about flat cash, but actually the previous budget was 294 million and it went up to 304 million. So before going into that flat cash, there was actually a boost. And again, talking to the guys up at Kingsway last week, they were really quick to point out that we are doing this with one hand behind our back as a country because we are still struggling through austerity. It's been nearly 12 years now that austerity has been around, and there's only so much you can do and cut according to your cloth. Now, again, sitting around this table, metaphorical table, we know what it's like. And so I think it's really important that what we do is we come together as a council to show that we would like this to be reviewed, to show not just the crews, not just our communities, but also the managers that come to us today, that you are our priority, Dundee is our priority, and we want to make sure that we all feel that Dundee has seen and is heard, and we want to be the best city that we can be, and we also want to make sure that we're the safest city that we can be. I do hope that everybody supports this evening. I can't imagine that there'd be any kind of division, but if so, then I presume that that's the way it'll go. But convener, this is the motion, this is the reasoning behind the motion, and I hope that everybody supports it.
Thanks, Lynn. And Will, you've put yours going to second this. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, Christina, thanks. I'm more than happy to second the motion from Councillor Short this evening. To me, it's vital that this appliance remains, and from the questions we've heard this evening, it highlights concerns that members of the Chamber have with regards to it. I fully appreciate from the conversation this evening that they'll be coming to briefings later this week so that members can get a better understanding. However, I think it's vital that the voice of this Chamber is heard this evening. You know, short-term temporary reductions in crewing can be dealt with through the recruitment process, and I completely understand what has been said to us tonight. However, you know, I think it was mentioned by someone else, but once an appliance is lost, even on a temporary basis, then there's always the potential that it may not return. I think what was key for me in this was that the following, not being my words, but were concerns of the firefighters themselves. And they said the removal of this appliance will lead to increased response times and will put firefighters and the community at risk. As Lynn's just mentioned, we are here for our communities, and we're here to make sure that Dundee is the most protected and best that it can be. And for me, the crews of these vehicles are the experts in what they do. And when they say that they believe there'll be an issue, I'm more than inclined to actually believe them. We've heard about the wider response capability and the national resilience, and appliances can be called to a fire or incident anywhere in the surrounding area. And, you know, just of late, crews have travelled to support in Edinburgh and Perth. The report that we've looked at says that officers from all stations in Dundee were in attendance at a fire in Perth, some in a command function and others assisting with firefighting operations. Should that happen again, and Dundee area being one vehicle down, then I think it leaves us with an issue. I'm also aware that similar motions are being raised across the country where fire stations are losing appliances, one most recently in Fife, I believe, and would urge all members to support this one. In my mind, it's short-sighted, and when looked at cumulatively with removals in Perth and Fife, I really do not understand how it can be said there'll be little impact to the services provided should there be any major incidents. Therefore, I would urge all members to support the motion to have this decision reversed and a further review of the process that led to this decision being made. It's a much bigger picture here than just one station, I think, and the safety of the crews and our communities is paramount. So happy to second. Thanks, convener.
Thanks, Will. And we have Fraser has an amendment.
Thank you very much, convener. Obviously, we weren't given prior notice of the motion from Councillor Short and Bailey Dawson. Therefore, I will read out what our amendment will read, because obviously we've had to do this just as we've read the motion from Councillor Short and Bailey Dawson. So we've no problem as such with what is actually in the content of the motion, but we feel that there is a need for a second paragraph, which should read as follows. Committee notes that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service local senior officer has highlighted that these reductions sit around the financial challenges presented by the resource spending review and flat cash settlement budget. It therefore also instructs the Chief Executive to write to the Cabinet Secretary for Justice asking for consideration to be urgently given for an uplift in the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service core funding in 2023 and future years to 2026-27. We agree completely with the points that Councillor Short and Bailey Dawson made regarding Dundee being our priority. The reality is, however, that the motion as it currently stands is asking the Scottish Fire and Rescue Board to reverse something which has come about because of the financial settlement that it has suffered, if you like, from Scottish Government. Similar, I have to say, to local government. Now, we could get into arguments about austerity. We could also get into arguments about the poor financial management of Scottish Government. We have been very critical, for example, of all the money that's been spent thus far on a Scottish National Care Service, which has now been put back today for the third time. I'll hazard a guess it never happens. We'll wait and see. But the point is, millions have been spent on that. We could go on about ferries contracts, 152 million overspent. We could go on about Scottish Government overseas offices. We could have a bun fight about our criticism of Scottish Government expenditure, and no doubt the administration would seek to defend that. I would also say this is in the context of the Scottish Government admitting to a 2.087 billion underspend in 2022-23. We're not, our group has made deliberately sure in our addition, if you like, to the motion, which is effectively what amendment is, to not make these party political points. It's simply to ask politely of the Cabinet Secretary for Justice to give consideration within his budget envelope for the consideration to be urgently given to reviewing the settlement that has been given to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing for this committee to come together on, just in the same way as I think we can come together all together on the first paragraph. So I therefore commend the amendment to the motion, which is really an addendum to the motion to this committee. Thank you.
Can I ask Roger, the head of the legal services, can you confirm and clarify the process for amendment, given that it's not in writing or in advance?
Yes, Chair. Just to confirm, in terms of Standing Order 38, it's perfectly acceptable for the committee to consider an amendment which has not been anticipated in advance of the meeting. Baillie McPherson indicated that you hadn't had any prior notice of the motion, and therefore it would seem clear that his amendment was not anticipated in advance of the meeting.
Okay, Chair. Kevin, you've got a comment.
I have got a comment. Just, you know, I think that it would be good if we could go forward, as Baillie McPherson suggests, as a united chambers. I think that, you know, Baillie McPherson's amendment enhances what's been said, and it is a fairly strong motion that the SNP have put together. I'm minded to support that. I wouldn't like to see a divide in the chambers moving forward. So I suppose the question really is to Lynn, who brought the motion forward, is she prepared to accept the amendment that Baillie McPherson put forward to save a vote? And obviously, let's see the thing go through united. You know, the ultimate thing is that we are united in the fact that the appliance and the changes to appliance in Dundee should be reversed. So, you know, let's move forward with some kind of stability in the chambers. We're all trying to achieve the same aims, and it is about public safety of the people that we represent. So I'm trying to keep the politics out of it.
And Fraser would like his seconder to speak. So, Lynn, could you consider what you were asked by Baillie Keenan? Are you willing?
No, I will just move on to having the two. Yes, please.
Right. Okay. Right. Craig, do you want to second Fraser's amendment?
Yeah, certainly do, convener. It's too bad, actually, as Baillie Keenan alluded to, that we can't just move forward as one. I think our amendment, which of course could not have been foreseen, given that we weren't told about this beforehand. So hence it being done on the night, which is perfectly acceptable, as Mr. Menny has confirmed. I think Baillie McPherson has outlined our position pretty well. The original motion is fine. You know, it's. I think there's nobody sitting here, as it were, who would not wish to see the city protected as best that it can be. However, the motion really amounts to no more than warm words unless we actually, as a council, ask the Scottish Government to address the fundamental problem, which is lack of money. I mean, we can talk to the cows come home, but unfortunately, fire officers who do their absolute best with the resources they're given, they cannot actually magic up additional money. And I think it's the people of Dundee need the reassurance that this council is actually going to vigorously ask the Scottish Government to cough up the money. You know, warm words are fine, but we actually need the money. The officers need the money to actually provide the service that we need and deserve. So on that basis, I'm very happy to second Bailey McPherson.
And we've got a comment from Pete.
Thanks, convener. Of course, I welcome the motion, and we all want to see Dundee safer. It's just a quick comment to pay tribute to the FBU, their organisation nationally on getting firefighters out outside the chambers today, which was an excellent event, as we've seen across Scotland, and the work they do in Dundee, Scotland, the whole of the UK, and internationally is really incredible work. So it's just a quick comment to pay tribute to everything that they've done.
Yeah, I was in City Square today and I saw quite a few councillors present, including yourself, Pete, and Lynn and John, Mark, and a few others. So we're going to, oh, wait a minute, Willie's just put comment.
Just very briefly, convener, you know, we're hearing what I would politely describe as warm words from Lib Dem and Labour councillors. But if it wasn't for Councillor Short and Councillor Dawson, we wouldn't even be discussing this item tonight. So I think we have to have a wee bit of context at who's actually setting the tone here. And once again, it's the administration and opposition councillors are just freeloading onto that. Thank you.
No, Pete, I'm not having any more second comments in this. I'm going to go back to Lynn. Lynn has got a chance to sum up if she wishes.
Yes, it's very interesting that we have come to this point. We talk about the fact that we write to the Scottish Government. I actually also wrote to my local MP and asked them to bring it up with regards to Barnett consequentials, because yet again, we have to remember that we are being cut left, right and centre, and we do not have the ability to borrow. Therefore, until we change that situation, which, as you will not be surprised to hear, in my view, is very much being independent and going it alone and having that opportunity, we will come to this stalemate time and time again, which is incredibly unfortunate, but that's as it stands. So that's me summed up, and thank you, convener.
Thanks, Lynn. Can we take this to a vote? Although I thought we'd all support this one, but it looks like we're going to a vote.
Convener, would it be helpful if I summarise the position before the vote is taken?
Yeah, I was waiting to see if the paperwork was going to disappear from the screen.
I would have let Willie do it, Roger.
Okay, Roger, do you want to take us through this?
Yes, thank you, convener. So the motion before the meeting is as displayed on the screen and circulated by email, moved by Councillor Short and seconded by Bailey Dawson. The amendment before the meeting is approval of the motion with the additional paragraph which was orally indicated earlier by Bailey McPherson, the amendment moved by Bailey McPherson and seconded by Councillor Duncan. So we'll now take a roll call vote and would ask each member to indicate whether they're voting for the motion or the amendment. Thank you.
Thanks, Bailey Roberts. I'll take the vote now. Bailey Roberts,
Motion.
Councillor Alexander,
Motion.
Councillor Anderson,
Motion.
Lord Provost Campbell,
Motion.
Deputy Lord Provost Cordell,
Motion.
Councillor Dawson,
The motion.
Councillor El Nakla,
Motion.
Councillor Flynn,
Definitely the motion.
Councillor Hunter,
Motion.
Councillor Lynn,
Motion.
Councillor Rome,
Motion.
Bailey Sawyers,
Motion.
Councillor Short,
Motion.
Councillor Smith,
Motion.
Councillor Toland,
Yep, motion.
Bailey Keenan,
Amendment.
Councillor Cruikshank,
Amendment.
Councillor McHugh,
Amendment.
Councillor McIrvin,
Amendment.
Councillor Malone,
The amendment.
Councillor Scullin,
The amendment.
Councillor Shears,
The amendment.
Bailey Wright,
Amendment.
Bailey McPherson,
The amendment.
Councillor Coleman,
The amendment.
Councillor Crichton,
The amendment.
Councillor Duncan,
Undoubtedly the amendment.
and Bailey Scott.
Amendment.
So that's 15 for the motion, 13 for the amendment, so the motion is carried.
Thank you. And the next item, please.
Thank you, convener. We move to item 2A on the agenda, which is a supplementary item, and it's the Dundee Local Policing Area Quarterly Report.
I just received a copy of it just 5 minutes ago. So I'm not sure. Is it Nicola that's taking us through this, or Ross? Because I can see both of you on the screen.
Thanks, convener. Nicola Shepherd. I'll just introduce if I can. Good afternoon, everybody. Chief Super Davison passes on his apologies. He's on annual leave at the moment and unable to attend today's meeting. I'm obviously joined by Ross, as you know, as local area commander. Before introducing the latest quarterly performance report, I'll just probably point out that it'll be the last report in this format, and the new report will reflect the new priorities and objectives for policing in Dundee as identified in the new local police plan. In terms of the report that's in front of you today, it covers the Q4 reporting period, and you'll see year-to-date comparisons and also the 5-year average. I know you're familiar with that. I trust you've all had the opportunity to read the report, note the performance over the reporting period. Before I ask Ross just to come in and highlight some of the points in the report for you, probably just like to draw to your attention that this will likely be Ross's last meeting with you as Ross moves to a new post in Angus very soon. I'm sure you'll join me in recognising Ross's outstanding leadership of the policing teams in Dundee over the past 2.5 years. I know he's been in touch with a number, if not all of you directly, just to make you aware of that. And I personally like to record my thanks to Ross and wish him obviously all the very best in his new role. The process for his replacement as the new area commander, that process for recruitment is underway, and his replacement will be made known to you as soon as possible after appointment or on appointment. I'll invite Ross, if I may, provide a brief summary of some of the key points in the report, and thereafter Ross and I will be more than happy to take any questions. Thank you. Ross.
Thank you, Superintendent. Just to kind of summarise the report then, I'll try and keep this as
as concise as I can to allow you to get to your questions. I appreciate the fire service report is taking longer than usual. So just to touch on the violence, disorder and antisocial behaviour summary, I think in total we see over the course of the performance year a reduction of around 150 victims in terms of being the victims of violence overall, which is very welcome. We see positive reductions around serious assault, common assault, and notably assaults against emergency service workers. Category around robberies remains a note of concern. We have seen kind of 2 previous years of reductions in that space, but this year a slight increase in those figures, which is under review through our Violence Prevention Board, and we will look again at our approach to that. What I would say is around robberies is that in the vast majority of cases, those crimes have not resulted in serious injury, with the threat of violence often being enough to kind of complete that crime. So on the whole, a positive step in terms of occurrence rates in that area. It continues to be the case that our serious and violent crime are driven by the consumption of drugs and alcohol. I think I've said that at various meetings throughout the time I've been the area commander, and that really doesn't change. We see lots of crimes where the victims and perpetrators are known to each other. See lots of crimes where the victim could be a victim one week and a perpetrator the next. So a kind of core group of recidivists, which continue to be the focus of our activities in order to try and reduce those occurrence rates and prevent people from suffering harm. Into the acquisitive crime space, a much more challenging performance year in this area, as it has been nationally around occurrence rates of acquisitive crime, largely due to the cost of living crisis driving up crimes, acquisitive crimes across the board. Some positives in amongst that in terms of the reduction of occurrence rates in terms of dwelling housebreakings, which are down by 20%, which is very positive. However, offset by increases around motor vehicle crime, commercial house break-ins and crimes of fraud, as is touched on in the summary. So still significant amounts of work to be done in the preventative space over and above that, which we're doing already in terms of our positive messaging, practical steps that we're taking to support commercial premises to make them more difficult to target. And also there's a huge amount of work that we do with individual victims of crime to try and prevent people from becoming repeat victims, particularly in respect to those who are most vulnerable to acquisitive crimes, both in their houses and online. Moving into the road safety space, again, we finished the performance year with no fatal road traffic collisions in Dundee, which is hugely welcome, supported also by a kind of nearly 10% reduction in road traffic collisions resulting in serious injury, which again, I think you'll agree is a positive statistic. Our road police and local officers continue to stop high numbers of vehicles. We've seen a kind of reduction in speeding and that influence around driver behaviour as a result of those kind of educational and enforcement stops, which again is very positive in terms of the sets of statistics that you see in front of you today. And moving on to our public protection statistics, again, we see an overall reduction of 12% in terms of occurrence rates across all of the sexual crimes that have been recorded during the performance year, and some really noticeable increases in detection rates, particularly in respect of the crime of rape, where we've seen a 21% increase in detection rates as a result of a kind of priority focus continuing to be brought through those investigations. And also the kind of excellent work of our sexual offences liaison officers, who are specialised officers who support the victims of that particular crime and other serious sexual crimes across that group. So again, welcome reductions in occurrence rates in that space. And just to touch on lastly, the last part of the summarised report, we see our approach to drugs kind of laid out in those 2 statistics around supply and possession. So a reduction in drugs possession cases, but still evidence of really positive enforcement action in terms of the individual possession of drugs, but a 30% increase in drug supply charges, just demonstrating that our focus is absolutely on preventing those who would choose to bring drugs into the city and then prey upon those vulnerable to harm as a result of their own health issues. So real focus on targeting those who are preying on our vulnerable people within our communities. Out with the summaries, as I say, the report touches broadly on a huge amount of work done around antisocial behaviour right across the multi-member wards throughout the quarter, particularly, and reflects on some significant decreases in antisocial behaviour for the city across the performance year, which again is positive to note. And as this is the Q4 report, I have also included some kind of year-long stats in respect of our missing persons inquiries and concern for persons calls, which, as can often be the case, are parts of the policing landscape which go on day in, day out, but perhaps don't catch the headlines in terms of the level of resource that's dedicated to keeping people safe and returning them to loved ones when there are concerns for their well-being. So without going on too much longer, I appreciate that you will have your own set questions on the back of seeing the report, and I will not distract you from getting to those questions any longer. So more than happy to take questions now, Convener.
And there's a question from Kevin King.
It's a comment, really, Convener. Convener, right at the start, you mentioned that you've only just seen the papers yourself, and that would kind of question why is the item still on your agenda.
No, they're online. They've been online.
I know that
they
were online, and I've seen that they're online myself, and I've obviously had a brief look through them. Obviously, think that the best way, and I've requested that of officers, is to be in a position where I've got a hard copy of them and can read them. And I switched my camera off there to go and pick the paper up for the door. So in that less than 5 minutes ago, these were delivered to my house. And we are in comments. I wonder whether we really should still go ahead with this item, or whether you would give with the opportunity at some other time to have went through it in more detail, given that, even when the original papers came out, there was no indication that this paper would be arriving late.
Ross, am I right in saying these were held because that they hadn't been ratified, or I missed part of the meeting the other week because I was at the dentist, so I did miss part of the meeting. So Ross.
No, Convener, just to clarify, I think at an early stage I was aware that Police Scotland has a national embargo on releasing these statistics publicly, which is in place until the 9th of June as a result of the fact it's the end of year statistics and need to be rationally approved before public release. I would say that I engaged with committee services at an early stage to make them aware of that date, asking for clarity in terms of whether they still wanted us to report to this meeting or wished it delayed to allow committee members to have a longer period of time to look at the report. And the advice I was given was to proceed to reporting into this date, due to kind of primarily concerns around the fact that the Q4 period would have ended, and this would be perhaps a little too long after the end of that period to still remain useful to committee members, and also in order to avoid us becoming out of sync with fire service colleagues who were ready to report into this meeting. So that was the direction I've given, and that's the approach that's been taken as a result.
Daniel, you've got a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam. We're definitely proceeding with the item. Before I continue.
Right. Do you want to carry on with this item? Because the last time the two reports were out of kilter, you complained. So do you want them both tonight, or are you willing to wait to another quarter? Well, nobody.
Chair, you're the convener.
Well, I think we should go ahead with it because I read the papers last week when they came out. I just got my paper copy tonight, a few minutes into the meeting. So I'm happy to carry on because, as I say, the papers have been online for quite a few days. So Daniel, do you want to
Yes, happy to. Thank you, Madam Convener. I wish to extend Liberal Democrat Group thanks to Ross and wish him all the best as he takes on his new role. And Angus, so that'll be the very best to you. On page 20 of the report, there is a sad increase of antisocial behaviour occurrences in my ward, Sharp Martin. I understand that the local community policing team that includes my ward has had its numbers reduced by half to 4 members. And these two factors combined cause obvious concern. Can I ask if this is anticipated to be a temporary reduction? And can I also ask what steps have been taken to reassure the public that the situation is in hand?
So just to come in on that, in terms of the statistics around the team being halved, I suppose that the point I would make around that is it's not actually a reduction in community officers. All that's happened is that the single team that used to cover that ward and into the city centre is being deployed and under kind of 2 different locality headings with an increased kind of leadership team around that. So there has been no reduction in community officers' posts, just simply 2 teams, one based in the city centre and the other remaining in your ward area. So they would have had twice the amount of work, but are now split across 2 locality teams. So that there is no reduction there. So I don't know whether it's just the manner in which that's been communicated to you that's caused confusion, but I would give you that reassurance that community policing and those local problem solving teams remain absolutely central to our approach of policing the city. And I'm more than happy to kind of pick up on any kind of broader concerns you have around the numbers, but to provide that reassurance, there has been no reduction in community policing officers throughout my period in time as the area commander, and that remains the case today.
Thank you, Ross.
And next we've got Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. And again, thanks, Ross, for your contributions to the city over the last few years. I think it's really welcomed, and also your contributions to the committee, because I always find you very approachable at the committee and meetings we've had ourselves outside the committee as well. So thanks very much for your efforts. Can I just, you've touched upon in page 35 with regards to the School Streets, Safer Streets policy that the council passed some time ago. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for meeting up after the last committee and making sure that we had a trial period pre-Easter, post-Easter to review the actual school streets sites at certain schools. Sites which are progressively getting worse again, and the high numbers of people and irresponsible drivers just ignoring the instructions and the traffic orders which are in place, which is really concerning, considering this is all about child safety, and they're actually putting child safety at risk here. I think your team have done a great job. Thank them for the feedback. I think the last paragraph in that page, it says a further meeting with yourself. But unfortunately, I don't think you're going to be here. So hopefully you'll pass it on to your successor, and maybe we could follow up on that. I think it's important to actually highlight the fact that school streets policy was there for children's safety, and we're finding that it's just not working with regards to the enforcement side, to be completely honest. And I think the committee would like to hear if we can actually get assurances from your successor. I'll have to add that bit in again, and look to find a resolution to this, and whether it be enforcement or any other suggestions that you might want to come in, because I think the softly approach has gone on for possibly far too long. And I think there's got to be a consideration of enforcement to make sure this policy works for the protection of the children at school.
No, thanks for the question, Councillor, and the kind comments. They're very welcome. Just to maybe pick up on some of your points, I kind of appreciate the kind of commitment to the Safer Streets initiative shown by Police Scotland has been reflected on. I think as any new initiative and scheme comes into place, then there is undoubtedly a period where education, warnings, and all those options need to be explored first to make sure people are given that kind of that period of time to adjust. I would reflect on the councillor's comments and say that period of education has worked its way through, and probably an enhanced approach to enforcement is likely to be needed, particularly for those who are repeat offenders and have failed to pay heed to the messaging that's been delivered by the local authority, warnings in the street by police officers, and if they continue to breach the terms of the scheme, then absolutely enforcement options can be taken. Just in terms of the meeting, I suppose just to see things through to its conclusion, I would like to hold that meeting before I disappear, if at all possible. So maybe something we can try and arrange over the next kind of couple of weeks. And I would say On the back of the work that was done just around the kind of school Easter holidays, we've also commissioned a wee bit of work from local analysts, which have provided some kind of statistics around collisions, particularly centred around the kind of the streets surrounding local primary schools, which I'd be keen to share with you and discuss through the course of that meeting. And similarly, obviously, those of us who've been engaging with folk who are attending schools regularly have picked up some of the feedback that's come back through them. So I think there's probably some real value in focusing on that meeting and agreeing on a prioritised approach going forward to the schemes. I would say, as more and more schools come online, it does start to challenge our resources, and we will clearly have to be kind of proportionate and well targeted. But just in line with our earlier conversations, we've obviously picked appropriate schools in the recent past where the highest number of complaints were being made, and an approach which seeks to target those which are most problematic would be welcome. I'm sure we can agree that going forward.
Thanks very much for that, Ross, and I'll certainly take you up on the offer of having that meeting before you leave for the faraway lands of Angus. But thanks very much for that, and appreciate your comments.
And next we've got George.
Thanks, Chair. Ross, yeah, all the best for your transfer to Angus. I looked at the report and looks like you've won a watch, because the reported crime in Angus is far less than what it is in Dundee, so you've done no bad there. I've got two questions. One of the questions about staffing seems to be a theme with Fire and Rescue and Police Scotland as well, and the other one's a vehicle theme in two parts. So the staffing one, when we look at this report, and it mentions staffing implications, and it states there's no staffing issues as a result of the report. I would just like to get my head around, we've seen operational officers, there was a political position whereby years ago it was stated they would retain 17,234 police officers throughout Scotland, and most recently Chief Constable Ian Livingston had indicated that he only has a police force officers of 16,600. So there's roughly 650 officers missing out the establishment list in Scotland. What impact has that had on Dundee? So effectively, how many police officers are we down in Dundee?
Ross, I can pick that one up. Thanks, Councillor, for your question. I mean, obviously, the Chief Constable's been quite upfront in terms of those hard choices that lie ahead in terms of the budget. What's happening in Tayside is there's a Tayside redesign group, which is obviously looking at how we prioritise our resources. The Chief's been pretty clear that we're going to maximise frontline service delivery, public protection, as well as our command and control function. So the actual numbers of how that reduction will be met across each of the divisions isn't yet known in terms of how we're going to reduce those numbers, but it's all hopefully the majority of which is going to be within back office functions. It's going to be looking at service redesign. Clearly the capital budget has limitations on it. Some of the work we were hoping to do in terms of overall service redesign technology may have to be paused out of some of those decisions, but the actual numbers for Dundee, that work is still underway in terms of how that proportionate percentage that will be allocated for Tayside as opposed to just Dundee will actually be felt. But so that Tayside redesign group is chaired by the Chief Superintendent, attended by all the senior management team. But I suppose in terms of assurance, till we know that, the focus is on protecting frontline resources. It's on the public protection teams, and it's very much on that contact command and control to be protected as much as possible. So it is very much about reducing duplication. There may be, I suppose, being realistic in terms of our service response. We apply, Thrive, threat, risk and harm assessments to calls. So it may be the case that because of those risk assessments, we're longer to attend calls that don't meet that higher kind of threshold of risk assessment. But we'll be doing everything we can to work, I suppose, behind the scenes to look at what we're doing in non-frontline roles where we can identify potential savings, whether that's national and regional, I suppose, prevention of duplication to bring people back into the front line. But I suppose in answer to your question, those numbers haven't been identified is probably the short answer. But there's a governance structure, certainly that the Chief Super chairs, where we're working to make, I suppose, the impact as minimal as possible.
When will these figures be recognised? What timeline have we got for this committee to be aware of what numbers officers will have?
For Dundee?
Yes.
It's certainly work that's underway, Councillor. I would probably give you that indication, and without probably trying to put a timescale on it, because it's underway, I would like to think, you know, these will be known within, you know, the next 3 to 6 months as to how that looks. And I suppose, you know, that would be the figures that were at that moment in time. Clearly, you know, as we evolve and look at you know, capacity change, new demand, those numbers could fluctuate. So, you know, I suppose the numbers in Dundee will be very much affected by decisions made right across Tayside. So I'd like to think we would, you know, be able to look at those numbers and the impact and what that will look like within the next 3 to 6 months.
Okay, thanks for that. And I've got another question, as I said, two-part vehicle themed. You did mention, Ross, the increase in motor vehicle crime, and it was just to get a response as to, is this a similar problem across Scotland, or is it a Dundee specific problem?
Councillor, just to come in on that, we've seen increases in vehicle crime nationally right across the country. I suppose just to give you some kind of clearer breakdown in terms of the problems we see locally, that's probably split into a couple of different categories of crime that we see on a regular basis. So firstly, we've got kind of local opportunist crimes, where we continue to see vehicles which are not secured correctly, or vehicles with high value items in open display, etc., which make them an attractive proposition for opportunist criminals. So that's one category. We also see are probably better organised repeat offenders, mostly males within that kind of late teens to early 20s category, where we've seen that increase in commercial house break-ins, a lot of them targeted towards garage premises, where the premises themselves are overcome, and then we see multiple vehicles stolen at the time of each of those crimes because car keys are readily available within buildings and then can be driven off. On the whole, we're not seeing the kind of that being done in terms of a financial gain. We find those vehicles then subsequently used in further crimes or abandoned and set on fire, etc., in respect of kind of local people. So effectively, the wanton use of vehicles to perpetuate a kind of criminal crime series. And then lastly, we do see an element of travelling criminals who are operating Scotland-wide. So, I mean, just recently, some kind of house break-ins identified in Dundee linked to perpetrators who are travelling out of the Edinburgh area, for example. So there is that range of activity that we're trying to kind of fight on all fronts. There's a huge amount of prevention work on the go just now, where we're taking active steps to really support the owners of those commercial business premises to limit their losses, look at the kind of crime prevention measures they have in place and try and make them as difficult a proposition to break into as possible. And that's obviously underlined with repeated messaging to kind of local people around the kind of security of vehicles and how they protect their own property to really try and influence the occurrence rates of those kind of crimes. So that maybe just gives you a bit more detail in terms of the challenges we're facing. We do see significant numbers of those crimes committed by the same individuals, so a real small core group of persistent offenders. And from a policing perspective, we have arrested those individuals on many occasions over the last kind of number of months, and see some repeat offending when on court orders, etc., which is a challenging aspect of the kind of current policing landscape. But on the whole, I hope that kind of answers your question and gives that kind of bit of national context to indicate it's not just a Dundee problem.
And the last part of that, Ross, is so speeding offences. Speeding's one of the fatal five. You see a marked decrease in recorded crime for speeding in the chart. Is this due to a lack of activity in operations due to resources, or are we just no focusing so much on speeding offences?
I'm not sure we necessarily fully understand the decrease. It's certainly not any massive reduction in the allocation of resources. Our roads police and colleagues are stopping literally thousands of vehicles across Tayside every year, and that continues. We're obviously still using our fixed point safety camera equipment on main trunk roads as well, tackling that speeding issue. So, we are looking at those kind of aspects around the influence of education in those thousands of stops and how it's impacting on driver behaviour, which is welcome. And we also see that maybe coming through our drink and drug driving statistics as well. I suppose that there is potential for the cost of living crisis to be impacting there in terms of whether people are just understanding the extra cost of driving fast and are starting to modify their own behaviours to try and be more fuel efficient. So that there may be a number of factors at play there, but I can provide that reassurance that it's not because of the fact that we are taking a step back from our enforcement activity.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we've got Craig.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just had a chance to read this report, albeit online, because I've still not got my papers, but there we are. So that's just first for the openers. And from what I read, I mean, and similar to most of these reports, there's reference to antisocial behaviour, etc. The changing seasons, of course, bring different challenges. You get longer nights, but equally you can get bad behaviour peaking during longer days and warmer days, certainly in my wards. Now, one of the customary responses that the police have always given me when I've raised such concerns is, apart from extra patrols, is to deploy the mobile CCTV van. But to put it in my old way, and I'll choose my words moderately here, on the 11th of May at an online meeting with ward colleagues, I was dismayed, to put it one way, to learn from actually not the police but one of the council community safety wardens that apparently this valuable resource is no more. So in terms of a dedicated mobile CCTV van for the Dundee area, we don't have one. Now, I do understand, because I've been told by police I had to chase this up, and indeed my group has written to the Chief Constable of Police Scotland for the full explanation. Yes, it's possible with a national force to request assistance from elsewhere in Scotland, but does that mean that if we ask for the van to come here, does that mean that elsewhere in Scotland is a van less? In other words, is this not robbing Peter to pay Paul? I'd just be interested in the thinking behind this decision.
Councillor, thank you for the question around that. So I suppose just to kind of put it plainly, we've had a CCTV mobile van for Tayside Division as a whole for a prolonged period of time. There's never been a vehicle specific to Dundee. It was always a divisional resource which I could bid for and brought into the city on a regular basis. That vehicle itself was extremely old. It was extremely large and was, to be blunt, off the road more often than we would have liked and becoming a drain on finances. So there was a review completed in respect of the use of the vehicle. In the back end of that, in order to look at what a replacement vehicle may cost, we decided to lease a vehicle for several months in order to look at the difference of having a modern bespoke vehicle in place. We did a full review in respect of the amount of times that vehicle was providing evidential material to support local cases, and having gone through that whole process and paying due consideration to how that money could be spent and officers deployed in other areas, came to the conclusion that actually the product the camera van itself was producing was limited, was not supporting many cases, and actually it was working effectively as a deterrent, but the cameras themselves were not often providing evidential material that was then being used. So locally, we have a number of options in terms of how we can continue to deploy that deterrent using our own local officers. And we, of course, retain that option of bidding for national resources for specific events and incidents where we feel that the camera facility will be useful. So I suppose in the basis of a picture around antisocial behaviour in Dundee, which has been declining year on year. We see another, I think, 1,100 fewer incidents this year than last, and other priorities where we are more stretched around acquisitive crime and violence, that there's kind of pragmatic but difficult decisions have had to be taken, and that's the basis that that decision was taken on. So, you know, a review of what we had, a period of reassessment and review, and ultimately a decision taken based on all of the evidence that was available to us at the time.
Okay, thanks very much for that quite fulsome explanation. I mean, I do get that there's not an unlimited resources available, but I think you actually touched upon my real concern when you mentioned deterrence. I mean, I'm no technical expert, so I absolutely take your word for it that perhaps the material that the van recorded wasn't perhaps, you know, of highest quality or best evidential admissible quality. But I think the value of that resource was really in deterrence, because although, you know, real troublemakers might come out at night hooded up and masked up and gloved up, and it kind of, in a way, doesn't matter if they get caught on CCTV. I think a lot of people during daylight hours who do not arrive intending to get out of hand, if they see one of these vehicles hiding in broad daylight, I think it is a deterrence, and it might encourage them to moderate their behaviour in the knowledge that, you know, they've actually been captured on camera. So, yes, I know that there are difficult and hard decisions to make, but I do hope that this doesn't involve officers, hard-pressed officers, having to respond time and time again, several times during one day, perhaps, to incidents that might perhaps have been deterred had this van still been in place.
And the next question's Dorothy.
Councillor, maybe just to respond to that, I suppose just to give a very kind of practical example of
Ross, are you answering? Just
sorry,
that one
convener,
stopped.
I'm not sure if you're still hearing me, if maybe you've lost reception. But yeah, no, sorry, I think that. No, sorry, I think my reception went there, and I wasn't sure if you'd moved on to another question, but it was just to give a practical example to Councillor Duncan around some of the findings from that. So we were finding that the deployment of a marked vehicle with marked officers was providing the deterrent effect without the need to spend tens of thousands of pounds on the camera equipment that was inside the van. We were finding that actually there was no behaviour to record when the deterrent was in place, resulting in the fact that a cheaper and more easily deployed resource was providing exactly the same benefits in terms of reducing occurrence rates than actually having the provision of the mobile CCTV van. Also kind of referring to the fact that we obviously have an extensive number of CCTV assets through the local authority, through SARC, and a variety of kind of private businesses that support that kind of review as well. So those were some of the kind of practical aspects of the decision. That deterrent effect absolutely must remain, and we would completely support you in our saying that, but we just think we can provide it in a more cost-effective fashion that allows us to redirect funds to some of our other priorities across the city.
Right, Dorothy.
Thank you, Christina. Ross, like everyone else, sorry to see you go, and wish you all the best in Angus, if that's where you're going to. I want to congratulate you on the very welcome improvement in detection rates for rape and attempted rape. That's so good to see this moving in the right direction. So good to see. Angus appears to be a bit of an outlier across the division in this area. Detection rates have reduced. Could you make some comment on that, please?
Ross, I could probably pick up. I'm not sure I'll offer much more than Ross in this space, simply because probably not prepped in terms of the Angus performance. But is it the Group 2 overall, Councillor, or was it the rape statistics?
Dorothy, you're on mute.
Sorry, page 47 of our bundle, rape and attempted rape, recorded crime and detection rates.
Apologies, my pages are numbered differently from your own.
For 22-23, Angus detection rate appears to have dropped from 55.8 to 40.3.
Nicola,
Yeah.
try page 37 on yours.
37 on mine. Okay, thank you. I suppose without looking at the specific detail of that, and I'd hate to try and give a generic response, but I think certainly looking at the stats for Tayside overall, and I can't be more Angus specific, but I think about 22% of all our Group 2s is non-recent, and obviously because of that, we have a number of, I suppose, crimes that take longer to progress and obviously pursue. I can only suspect that there'll be a number of those under investigation, not only by local officers in terms of our either recent or non-recent, but also by our National Rape Task Force, which is a national division, obviously looking at serious crime. The numbers, as you know, probably even from performance in Dundee, can fluctuate quarter to quarter, but certainly the position in the division, it's the rape investigation team isn't split between Dundee, Angus and Perth and Kinross. It's primarily the same cadre of officers, so the different, clearly, detectives on these cases, but actually working under one or two senior investigating officers. So the principles applied in terms of investigative thresholds, solo deployments, care and welfare of victims and support is a kind of generic static position, and that's reflected across all three local policing areas. So other than I suppose certain cases that may still be under investigation, there may be, I suppose, the percentage difference in Angus will be, it might appear a higher percentage, but actually the numbers are less, and they can be actually concentrating maybe just on one or two cases where the reporting just doesn't stem from one crime. There can be multiple crimes for one investigation, so we do actually tend to see sometimes quite a big shift in detections, just bearing in mind how many or how long it takes to deal with specific cases. But I suppose in terms of assurance, we have oversight by a senior investigating officer and support in place for all victims of sexual crime, and a number of obviously partnership arrangements to best support even those that maybe aren't ready to report, but clearly are in a position or would like to have, forensic samples taken for instance, where and at times sometimes where the crime's recorded, but the victim just doesn't feel the ability to engage with the police at that point, where we'll record the crime but wait until the victim's ready to engage. So there may be slight delays, I suppose, in terms of detections materialising. So I hope that answers your question, but if there is anything more Angus specific, feel free. I can certainly catch you offline and have a look at that.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you.
And we have a question from Kevin.
Thank you. Convener, I'd just like to, well, first of all, wish Ross all the best in moving to Angus. Hope his career keeps going from strength to strength as he moves on. The other one, though, in relation to the report itself, I would like to ask questions about the theft by shoplifting. Obviously, it makes reference to the cost of living crisis, makes reference to the fact that there's been an increase of 27%, and a lot of the theft around, it's a household goods, some of which are to be consumed by that particular individual, and others for a sort of quick sell, but really trying to deal with household budgets. And I'm wondering sort of how we break that down and try to feed it towards the Dundee partnership, so that, we're trying to address, if it's a family that someone's went out stealing because they want to feed the family, then how do we feed that? How do we get that towards the Dundee partnership and get them that level of support that would stop them needing to go out and shoplift again? And, how do we take the statistics that you've got and the individuals that are in among that there and try to do something for the point of view of being supportive? Because, it sounds like, a cost of living crisis that ends up with you coming out, or someone coming out the end of it with a criminal record, seems to be pretty bad. But I can understand the cost of living crisis is pushing people in that direction, fuel bills at ridiculous levels, and the cost of food to the family unit going up by what they say is 850 quid a year. So I'm wondering how the Dundee Partnership can best look at that, or how you're feeding that into the Dundee Partnership, so as that we're looking to address the shoplifting issue and looking to address the problems that our constituents have, so as that people don't end up with criminal records. And, you know, later in the Policy and Resources Committee, we dedicate sort of £500,000 towards food. You know, we're hitting the right mark there as a Dundee Partnership.
Councillor, thank you for that question. I suppose just to come in on a couple of different aspects to that then. So firstly, I've got real confidence in my frontline officers in terms of their decision making at time of attendance in terms of shoplifting. So we obviously have a range of disposals available to us when we detect a crime. In those instances where we are finding that there is a genuine need and very sensible and reasonable explanations as to why that crime may have occurred. In the right setting, we can offer, you know, diversionary outcomes, formal police warnings, etc., to ensure that we're not then stinging that offender with a further fine, for example. They may be punitive and unwelcome and actually exacerbate the problem. So that there's some real sensible decision making taking place by our frontline officers in tackling that particular kind of crime. More broadly, when we attend any incident where there is vulnerability, we consistently produce what's called a vulnerable persons database entry. So what that is our means of sharing information with a broader partnership, assessing that and pushing it into the hands of the appropriate agency, whether that be statutory partner or third sector agency, to make sure that the individual who's the subject of that report receives the appropriate care and assistance that they may need. So, as I say, to take a practical example around shoplifting, if we find someone who is in poverty, struggling to feed children, for example, then we can put the detail of all of that into an appropriate report and share that across the partnership to see if we can gather the necessary support for that individual and the broader family to try and take that reasonably negative experience in contact with the police and turn it into something positive for local people. And just lastly, and I say probably just a word in support of our kind of our business sector across the city, we are anecdotally seeing you know, those stores which are perhaps targeted more often than not around shoplifting, similarly being really sympathetic and open to kind of working with their customers and offenders to try and, you know, I'm not saying not report, but trying to work with people to get to positive outcomes in a very responsible way. And I think they should probably be applauded for that efforts in that front as well. So there are a number of things going on to pick up on that very vulnerability that you speak about, with the police playing a kind of a part in making sure that each contact we have with local people is dealt with in a positive fashion and used as a means to try and support people rather than simply punish them.
I mean, thanks very much for that. I'm maybe take it up through the Dundee Partnership just to see if there's anything else could be done to, you know, address the problem of shoplifting and indeed obviously make sure that we're targeting the most vulnerable.
And thanks to Fraser, Pete and Charlie for withdrawing their questions. So are we agreed with this report? Yeah. Right, can we move on, please?
Thank you, Convener. We now move to the next item on the agenda, and that's the antisocial behaviour report.
This report provides information and data on the work of the Neighbourhood Services Antisocial Behaviour Team for the Q4 of 22-23. The report includes information about the reopened cases as previously requested by this committee, and there's a case study to highlight the partnership working that's been carried out by the team. So, Elaine, are you taking us through this, or is... I'm trying to see who's on the call. Sorry, I've had to cut my screen down so I could keep the chat open.
Thank you, Convener. I think the report is probably self-explanatory, so there's not much for me to add to it, but I'm happy to take any comments or questions from elected members on the content.
Right, we've got Charlie.
Thank you, convener. And thanks for the report, which we receive regularly, and it does provide us with information that perhaps we already know through our constituents, that the number of cases of antisocial behaviour is on the increase. And I would point to the fact that Lochie, yet again, is way ahead of all the other wards in terms of antisocial behaviour reporting. Can I just say that this is not a questioning of the antisocial behaviour team, who I think I'm on record as saying before, do an absolutely fantastic job in very, very difficult circumstances. And so I'd like that passed on. But we are seeing an increase. And also, when we look at the data on page 30, 31, and well, 30 and 31 in particular, we see the graphs that actually tell us and show symbolically what's happening in terms of antisocial behaviour. I've got a wee problem with the legends on this, because if you look at the North East ward, the total is 12, whereas in Lochie it's 60. Now, visually looking at this as a presentation, it looks like everybody's in the same place. Now, it might be proportionate to the population, I don't know, but maybe perhaps if we could have a look at this. But I am really concerned about the rise in violent behaviour, verbal abuse and threat and youth disorder in the ward. And what I would request, Elaine, if it's possible, I know we're coming up to recess, but if it's possible, can we actually have a discussion, the ward members and anybody else who wants to come along, discussion with yourself and the police in particular, to look at this rise in violent behaviour, because it's the one thing that's being reported to me on a daily basis now, and it's not always reported back to the antisocial behaviour team, nor to the police. So I'd like to see if we can come together and develop some form of strategy that tries to address some of these issues and to communicate that strategy to the people of the ward. Because when people approach me and they say, this is getting worse, I have to say, yeah, no. I don't have the answers. I don't know where we're going with this. So I would just like to make a request, Elaine, that we get the agencies involved, the antisocial behaviour team, the police, the housing, and whoever else can give us an opinion, an informed opinion on what we could do to address this. I have a meeting to organise with one of the major retail outlets in Lochie, and their big concern is youth disorder. And so I'm trying to get that meeting set up. So I think it would be helpful if we just, the reports are great. I mean, I was the person I think that requested these reports in the first place, but I think we've now got to the stage where we're saying, yeah, we know that. And what do we need to do next? What are the next steps we've got to do, take to reassure residents in Dundee and in my ward, I'm referring to my ward in particular, that there are actions that are being taken, there are actions that are being considered, and there are actions that have got targets beside them, so that we could see, hopefully see a reduction. Now, I accept the fact that antisocial behaviour team and yourself, Elaine, can't be responsible for the behaviour of people in Dundee. That's a question that involves far more than just the forces that have got an authority here. It involves communities, and if you, it includes families. But I think we've got to have a message to go out there to say, we're going to try and do something. We're going to do this something against the target to see if we can't start to detect a reduction, particularly in these areas of violent behaviour and verbal abuse that is being reported to me almost on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Malone, and absolutely there is always that open offer to any elected member or group of ward councillors to have a multi-agency briefing on what's happening within the ward and definitely in terms of the actions that have been taken. Thank you very much for your comments in relation to the hard work that goes on by the antisocial behaviour team and the partners in the city, because I agree with that. I think there is a lot of hard work that goes on, but there are pockets of issues that are difficult to break through. So how do we deal with that? And also maybe what we can cover is some of the with the schools coming off at the end of the month, that just some of the work that we'll be doing over the summer in terms of diversionary work, to help deal with some of the challenges that we do see over the summer months as well. So happy to make that offer to any elected member that we could set up briefings for them on the work that we're doing within their particular ward. And it is, as you say, different depending on different wards and different challenges within them. Don't know, Tom, if there's anything you would like to add to that.
No, I think you've covered it, Elaine. Happy to do that. With the relevant partners, I think Councillor Malone's acknowledged that the answer doesn't just lie with the antisocial behaviour team. It's a whole range of partners, but I think by including the case study that we did, just trying to reflect some of that work. But yeah, we can certainly look at bring partners together to look at what else and what more can be done.
Can I come back in?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Elaine and Tom. That's helpful, and I do appreciate that we've had this open door policy for a number of years, that we could come along and chat to these. I guess my concern is more about the community and the community's understanding of what we're trying to do. Now, I could get a briefing, and if somebody comes to my surgery, I could say, right, this is what they're doing, but that's a tiny proportion of the population. I just think we need something that gives us a better communication method for the communities. Perhaps it's the LCPP. I don't know, and representation there, a presentation on antisocial behaviour at that body. But I welcome the fact, and I know the team do a great job, because I've spoken to the team members, and I do appreciate how horrible some of the circumstances they have to deal with. But I just think we're not getting out to the Dundee community that we're doing something about it, and it can't be that we're left just to say, here's the data. Yeah, they're getting worse. Yeah, they're getting worse. So I would appreciate some thought going into how we can better communicate what we're trying to do in terms of antisocial behaviour. So thank you.
Happy to look into that, Councillor Malone and convener.
George has got a comment and a question.
Thanks, convener. I note from the report that the total number of antisocial behaviour cases has jumped from 299 in the last quarter to 401 in this quarter. That's an overall increase of a third. Drilling further down, the data notes that drug cases have increased by a fifth, from 38 to 46, and refers to a significant rise in recorded youth disorder. I'd like to ask two questions on these figures. Firstly, these quarter comparisons provide a useful indication, like Councillor Malone, I appreciate all that the antisocial behaviour team do. But is it normal to see a significant, can officers please advise what the typical year-on-year comparisons are? And is it normal to see a significant spike in cases after Christmas, or is this part of a regular pattern? Anyway, I'm sure officers would agree that these matters require to be addressed. And the second one is on youth disorder. The report points to cases being positively detected. Is this another way of saying that we have proactively been discovered by the team, as opposed to being reported by members of the public? I suppose what I'm getting is it's a good thing that things are being identified before they become a more major nuisance. On the other hand, it would strongly suggest that the true volume of antisocial behaviour doesn't always get properly recorded, as there may well be people out there who decide not to complain through official channels. And the spirit of proactivity, can officers please outline what steps are being taken to address the post-pandemic surge in antisocial behaviour? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cruikshank, and happy to look at those questions. In terms of the year-on-year comparison, and we're happy to ask the antisocial behaviour team just to have a look at that to see whether there is a trend or whether there's a specific spike that's happened there. So happy to come back to all elected members with that information. In relation to, I'll pass to Tom in terms of the detailed questions you've got on the delivery of service. So Tom, if I can ask you to pick those up.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. I think in terms of looking at youth disorder, it's certainly something that a whole range of, even within our own services, are involved in looking at that and detecting, sharing information, and then through the multi-agency tasking and coordinating group. So information that we have is fed into that group. There's conversations made there about the best way to approach that. And I think the case study maybe gives some examples of that, because it involves our community safety warden service. Depending on where it is, it might always there may also be information that we can look at through the SARC. So in terms of that kind of proactivity, it's very much a team effort and feeding in information and trying to get the right people involved in the response. So that's certainly much you know, the way in which we work, either within our own services and community safety, and also with wider partners through that MATAC process.
Thanks very much for both responses, and there's no doubt that the team have its work cut out for them. So I'm grateful for your answers. Thank you very much.
Kevin, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Convener, it's really just asked whether when people engage with the antisocial behaviour team, are we in a position to give them some indication, perhaps a brochure or a leaflet that'll explain to them the powers that are held within the antisocial behaviour team, the sanctions that can be taken, and where the trigger points for that would be. It's just that I have a number of antisocial behaviour issues that perhaps it's a neighbour dispute that's went on for years, or one where there is a noise just started, they've made a complaint and they expect that, having made the complaint, that the person behaves immediately, and that's unlikely to be the case. But while these things fester away in people's mind, they leave people in a bad place, whether that's affecting their own mental health because of lack of sleep, or just the fact that it's playing on their mind constantly about the antisocial behaviour that's going on round about them. So I'm wondering whether we have a document that sort of says, here are the things that we need to evidence, and then we can take this action, or how we bring in the other multi-agencies to make it a bit of a stronger action. If we've not got it, can we produce something?
Well, thanks very much for that question, Bailey Keenan. I think it is important that we keep regular dialogue with victims of antisocial behaviour, and the team endeavour to do that by keeping people up to date. But sometimes the processes can take some time, particularly where it's court action that's involved. So it's very difficult to put timescales on that, but certainly giving people an indication of the range of tools that are available to the team and how they can be used. We can certainly look at how that's communicated. I'll bring Tom in just to maybe outline what is already in existence, but there may be more things that we can do to shine a light on just the range of tools and how and the level of evidence that we would need to gather in order to be able to take cases forward successfully. But Tom, do you want to come in on what's available at this point in time?
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. I believe there are some information leaflets, but we'll certainly have a look at that and make sure they've got the right information in them, and maybe have a wee review of that and make sure we have the right information to I think tell people what they can expect, and maybe signpost them to the places that they can get help and support. So I'll certainly pick that up with the team and just double check on that. Billy Keenan.
Thanks, I really appreciate that. I think it would be worthwhile, given that the effect that antisocial behaviour has on individuals. So I really appreciate the effort. Thank you.
And Heather.
Thank you, Convener. I was just going to thank Bailey Keenan for that. I think that's a really useful suggestion, and if we can review what we've got, it might be something that we could bring to the best value group, to go through the text and make sure that it reads well. But I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
And I'm not seeing any more questions, so can we agree this report? Yep. Can we move on, please?
Thank you, Convener. We now move to item 4 on the agenda. It's Air Quality Update Report, and this is for your approval.
This report provides an update of the air quality in the city based on the ratified data of 2022 and shows an improvement in the levels of nitrogen dioxide across the monitoring network. The report provides updates on modelling work carried out on the Lochie Road corridor and the progress of the implementation of the low emissions zone. Are there any questions? And we've got Roger.
Thank you, Convener. The report references a modelling project which officers were remitted to carry out for the Lochie Road back in 2021. It mentions changes to road geometry and other interventions which could be used to reduce emissions that polluted congested corridor. I'd like to ask a question about how we organise the council's approaches, and this is on the back of having several meetings within the Maryfield Board about bus corridors and active travel freeways. Officers will be aware, in addition to this modelling work, there are separate simultaneous work streams looking at bus priority and active travel. However, at this stage, it appears that none of these projects are coordinated with each other. It's clear that bold action is required to reduce traffic and pollution on Lochie Road, but my concern is that lots of time, effort, money and resources risk being wasted in the meantime if any of these proposals turn out to be incompatible with each other. Can officers please therefore outline the vision for Lochie Road and how all these various threads will be woven together in a coherent strategy? Thank you.
Tom?
I think, I'm not sure who's on, colleagues from City Development, but that's an area of work that they would look at in terms of coordinating. In terms of Lochie Road, that was a specific piece of work that this committee asked to be done. So we've done that work, but I think the report also shows that there's been significant improvement in Lochie Road as the bus companies prepare for the low emission zone and the introduction of low emission buses. So I think we've seen significant improvement in Lochie Road to the point that it's now compliant with the air quality objective, which for many years, we struggled to get to that point. So I can't give the fullest answer in terms of the other measures that probably sit under the city development portfolio, but I do know that in terms of the work we're doing collectively to improve air quality, and the forthcoming low emission zone is certainly having an impact to improve air quality in the city.
Like I said in my opening remarks, this is, because of what's happening in my own ward with the Forfar Road and Albert Street, etc., the bus corridors and the active travel freeways. And it doesn't seem to be joined up. But like you said, that's city development that is coordinating those streams of work. But thanks anyway for your response, Tom. Thank you.
I can see Robin on the call. Robin, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to arrange a specific briefing with Councillor Cruikshank to pick up the points that she's raising. I think Tom's highlighted the fact that Lochie Road is now within legal limits. I think is immensely positive, and clearly the migration of the number 28 to an electric bus is a big part of that. But the work that has been done around revising traffic light sequences and minor changes to turning, etc. on Lochie Road, I think has also made a contribution. So very happy to pick that one up and to discuss any forthcoming measures with Councillor Cruikshank. So I will arrange that.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Next, we have Michael.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be quick because I know the time tonight. It's just on the kind of road geometry that Councillor Cruikshank
Councillor Cruikshank mentioned. It's to do with the pavement and the road because of this, because the works are going to be at a greater distance. And Bill McPherson and I continue to get concerns about people flouting the rules of no right turns. This is a small minority of drivers, but they still do it. And I was wondering, can any further road interventions be considered, which will make this kind of flouting of the no right turns more difficult to do so? Because me and Councillor McPherson see this on a daily basis.
Chair, do you want me to come in?
Yeah, Robin.
I'm not entirely clear which junction it is. I think it may be Cleghorn Street onto Lochee Road. And I think members were aware there was a second intervention there to try and prevent some of the more creative ways of avoiding the right turn ban there. Now, it has prevented the vast majority of traffic doing that. I'm very happy to pick up any further complaints that Councillor Coleman has or Bailey McPherson. So perhaps we can take that up offline, because as far as I was aware, the measures which Sustainable Transportation and Roads put in place were being successful now in preventing those illegal manoeuvres.
Right,
Yeah,
Michael.
fine, Chair. Cheers.
Right, okay. Mark, you've got a comment.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just to sort of follow up, because Lochee Road is on the boundary of Coleside as well, and I think it's important we recognise that. I think the infrastructure changes which have happened on Lochee Road have actually been a step in the right direction. It addresses a lot of what councillors have said, and I think it's important to note that active freeways, the bus prioritisation work is being done, is a step in the right direction to increase the ever improving air quality figures that are presented today. I think the numbers presented today are absolutely excellent, but we shouldn't be complacent, and we've got to continue the good work moving forward. And I think even the number 28 bus has been mentioned on a number of occasions. And I think that's a great change to the bus service, which was supported by the Scottish Government's funding model, and also this improvement in the fleet of the bus network within the city, again, approved by the funding from the Scottish Government. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I think we shouldn't get complacent, as I said, and we're moving in the direction, and we have to continue this. We have to look at active travel. We have to look at sustainable transport as being the priority. And I think it's always a step we should be actually looking forward to. Thank you.
Fraser, you got a comment?
I do indeed, Convener, and it's just following up from the helpful response from Mr. Presswood. Councillor Crichton is correct. We've repeatedly raised what are minor flouting of the no right turns, and it is indeed, as he correctly says, the Cleghorn Street junction. In fact, the information is actually already with his department. The most recent email sent was from myself on the 6th of May. And we were specifically raising the most recent concern from a resident that, in fact, and this resident, I should say, he lives at that end of Cleghorn Street. He looks right onto the junction from his living room window. And the point he was saying was a slight increase in the island would probably further assist the situation. So I was really wondering, I've not had a response from it was sent to Team Leader Road Safety on the 6th of May, and obviously it'd be very much appreciated that the department could give some consideration into the practicality of that. Thank you.
Happy to do so, Convener.
Right, thank you. And there's no more questions on this. I'd be happy to agree the report. Right, agreed. Can we move on?
Thank you, Convener. We now move to item 5 on the agenda, Regulation of Investigatory Powers Scotland Act 2000 and Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. This report is for your approval.
I'm not sure who's going to talk to you on this one. Is there anybody speaking on this report tonight? Sorry, I'm trying to see over the top of a fan.
Convener.
Elaine, oh, Roger, there you are. Right, Roger, do you want to speak to it?
Thank you, Convener. I'm the senior responsible officer for RIPSA within the council. I hope that the report speaks for itself, but I'll be very glad to answer any questions that elected members may have.
Any questions for Roger? Nope. Okay. Do you want to agree this report? Yep. Right, thank you very much. And thanks for your attendance.
Thank you, Convener. The next committee this evening is the Neighbourhood Services Committee.
Hello, Mr. Many. I'm going to propose, given the fact that we've been on this call since 5, that we have a break until 19:30. I'd wanted to give you 10 minutes, but I'm worried about the time. So can we have a comfort break now and reconvene at 19:30? You've got 6 minutes. Is that agreed unanimously? Okay. See you again at 19:30. Mr. Many, that's 7:30. Do we need to check that everyone is back, or can we begin?
Thank you, Convener. Given that you indicated the meeting would resume at 7:30 and it is now 7:30, the meeting can resume.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll turn to Veronica to take us through the agenda, please.
Thank you, Convener. Item 1, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations?
I see no comments in the chat, so I take it there are no declarations of interest. Next item.
Thank you. Item 2, cemetery headstone safety. This item is for your approval.
So item 2 is an agenda note which reminds us that any headstones above 1.5 metres in height that have fallen over have to be made safe. The committee previously agreed for an initial 2-year contract, which was awarded to Vermicon to carry out this work. And the committee is now asked to approve an extension of that contract for a further 2 years. Does anyone disagree with this recommendation? I can see nothing in the chat, so I think we agree to extend the contract for 2 years. Thanks, Veronica. Next item.
Item number 3, Neighbourhood Services Service Plan 2023 to 2027. This plan is for your approval.
Thank you. This is a very chunky report. We've been through it a number of times in the department. It provides you with an update of progress on the service plan for neighbourhood services for the period 2023 to 27. It covers a wide strategic area, encompasses housing, construction, community, safety and public protection and the environment. It reflects the performance management framework and links into the city and council plans. Appendix 1 of the report provides specific details relating to budget, structure and performance in each of the strategic areas, including the statutory drivers and legislation which influence the work carried out within the service. Appendix 2 are the final outcomes report on key performance indicators for 2022-23. And I'm recommending that we approve this report, but I'm happy to take questions at this point. Now, let me just see. I think it's Councillor Coleman first.
Yes, thank you, Convener. On page 24, the percentage of let to statutory homeless households is still quite a bit below target. Can I ask what steps are being taken to ensure that all homeless households are allocated satisfactory permanent accommodation and the target is met?
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. I'll bring in Louise Butcher to respond to that question, please. Louise, if you could come in here.
Yeah, thank you, Convener, and thank you for the question, Councillor Coleman. What I would highlight is that 75% is the target. Now, in terms of the value, it is impacted by the level of sheltered properties that we've got across the city and the lets that we make. So to give you an example, for the full year, there was 605 lets to the homeless group out of 1,131 lets. Now, if we extracted the sheltered lets, for example, we had 920 mainstream lets, 555 of which went to homeless, which showed our target was higher, just above 60%. So we're continuing to work. Oh, sorry.
Apologies. Can we ensure that everyone has muted their microphones? Apart from Louise, who's responding to the question. Thank you.
Apologies. No. So it just shows how that target in itself is reduced dependent on the makeup of the lets over the course of the year. But we're meeting with not only in-house staff and our lettings team, but also with our Common House and Register partners who support us in increasing the lets to homeless households. And we meet with them quarterly with a monthly review of the target that we feed back to them. So we're keeping a close eye on this target moving forward.
Thank you, Louise.
Yes, so my understanding, if it was the mainstream lets, it would be 60%, but it's quite a complicated percentage to understand. So we might try and simplify it going forward so it's easier. Can I take a question from Councillor Cruikshank, please?
Thanks very much, Convener. Can I begin by first welcoming this updated plan for the neighbourhood services? Needless to say, is one of the council's biggest and most impactful departments. They've certainly got their work cut out for them. I'm pleased that there are lots of achievements to celebrate in this report, along with several ambitious strategies and a broad remit to make our city a better place to live, work and visit. I'd like also to thank staff and partners who work together to make this happen in Dundee. The plan references £400,000, I think I'm reading that right, which has been spent on biodiversity projects. I assume that this refers to rewilding parks and other green spaces across the city. Can I ask how this 400,000 figure compares to any changes in spending on landscape maintenance and grass cutting? There are skeptics that say that these rewilding projects are a cover up for cutting services, instead of cutting grass. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cruikshank. I completely agree that we have an education programme to do to help people understand what we're trying to do in these open areas. We're absolutely, managing open areas in an ecological way is not about neglect. It's about enhancing an area and spending quite a lot of work on ensuring it's working for us. I don't know if Mr. Boyle would like to come in and talk about the comparison between this investment and past maintenance numbers.
Yeah, thanks, Convener, and thanks, Councillor Cruikshank. And absolutely categorically advise that this is additionality in terms of what we're doing here. This is adding benefits to the biodiversity and the climate action plan, the wider objectives we share within that, and it doesn't mean that we are going to the detriment of any existing maintenance. In fact, the contrary. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, Convener. My question is regards to page 25, when it shows the percentage of household waste unrecycled and compost is kind of still well below target. Are officers confident that the 48% target will be met? And exactly when will that be? Also, can officers please advise as to what the Scottish Government recycling targets are for later years, as obviously 48% will hardly be the end point. So just kind of the short term and long term aims of how we're going to get to our targets.
Thank you, Councillor Crichton. I had a meeting with the team last week to review these targets and explore what we can do better in terms of food waste recycling. There are always changes to what's counted and that affects the percentages. But I'll let Mr. Boyle come in and explain the efforts that we're making to hit the targets.
Okay, thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Crichton. The second part of the question you'd made was about the overall recycling targets. Currently, there's a recycling target nationally, an aspirational target of 70% for Scotland to meet.
I've got to say, as previously discussed, I think at the last Policy and Resources Committee on 15th of May, I confirmed then that that issue is under review just now as part of a wider consideration that the Scottish Government are undertaking through 2 separate consultations that are just about to report back. But let me explain. The household recycling rate is a performance measure defined by the Improvement Service nationally as part of local government benchmarking framework. It has been noted, and as the convener has just alluded to, it's a priority area for performance improvement for the city. In response to this challenge, we have got a waste and recycling strategy which sets out 42 clear actions to support Dundee's long-term plans to maximise recycling and minimise general waste. Obviously, this is a key focus in terms of the recycling aspirations we've got that are contained within the Climate Action Plan. And a key part of this is going to be around affecting behavioural change. As a city authority, we're one of the first to be charter compliant. We've got a whole range of recycling options available to residents. The key challenge is in and around getting the residents to make that and affect that behavioural change. Simultaneous to all of this, of course, is the fact that the government are looking at a whole range of different initiatives, and we are developing services and activities to meet future needs, working with Zero Waste Scotland, COSLA and the Scottish Government. And you'll be aware more recently there's a review of the impacts of the forthcoming legislation changes on things like curbside collections. That was discussed at, I think, a previous Policy and Resources Committee. We spoke about the Circular Economy Bill and the waste route map to 2025 and beyond. So the current target's at 70% nationally. That aspirational target is something that will be under review. And the Circular Economy Bill convener will aim to establish the legislative framework to support Scotland's transition to a zero waste and circular economy society. And that will be born through simple things like significantly increasing the reuse and recycling rates, and undertaken again sensibly by residents and businesses. And we move towards the agenda of extended producer responsibility. We see more businesses being expected to play their rightful part in that as well. And the specific element I think that Councillor Crichton is asking about is the targets. The accompanying legislation or consultation rather is this route map to 2025 and beyond. And we'll wait for that to report in the late summer. We're hearing that's when we should expect to hear it. And that will be specifically aimed at maximising progress towards our waste and recycling targets. I hope that's helpful, Kabir.
Thank you, Councillor Crichton. It is an area that we're very focused on going forward, so we had quite an intensive discussion about our options. I'd like to bring in Bailey McPherson next.
Thanks, Commissioner. Could I first of all just make a comment, because the figures in relation to the Private Sector Services Unit are included in this, and as Colin McRae retires as the Private Sector Services Manager, I would just like to personally pass on my sincere thanks. He's been an absolutely excellent officer of a very large number of privately rented properties in my ward, and I dare say he's had quite a number of emails from me over the years. He's been absolutely excellent, and I wish him a long and happy retirement. My question's not about the private sector rental, so it's about the figure on page 25, just above the figures that Councillor Crichton mentioned a moment ago, the street cleanliness score. And the street cleanliness score remains again below target. Now, it's impossible to actually understand the direction of travel as we have a figure of 86.2% with a benchmark, a target, and a target for future years. But as I say, only one figure in relation to actuality of 86.2 as opposed to 94. I don't want to rehearse. I mean, our group's position on street cleaning is quite clear. Everybody knows it. We feel the staff do an excellent job. There ain't just enough of them, and we don't feel that the occasional use of private sector contractors, which was done a few months ago, or these one-off local area cleanups, really cuts it in relation to real strategic long-term impact that additional staffing would bring in. But I have a very specific question for Mr. Boyle, and that is, what's the direction of travel on this 86.2%? What, for example, has it been over the last 5 years? And are we actually likely to make the target of 94 in the foreseeable future?
Mr. Boyle.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Billy McPherson. Again, the 94% is an aspirational target. It's a target that has been hit by mainly the island authorities and the more rural authorities across Scotland. So I think we should try and put our best foot forward and always try and aim to improve. And that's definitely the direction of travel as far as I'm concerned, and leading that for the city. We are putting together a dedicated plan with during 23-24, which is identifying priority locations, hotspots and specific routes, which we're going to be targeting over the coming year. And those areas will be closely monitored going forward. We're all familiar with the same hotspots popping up, so we need to be a wee bit more proactive, and we will endeavour to do so. But we do need to look at a mixed economy in terms of what we're doing in terms of the physical removal of litter and street and the management of street cleansing across the city. So we will be looking at a combination of large mechanical and small compact sweeping routes and manual patrol beats. And we did, as I think Bailey McPherson had alluded to earlier on, initiated some work with an external contractor who brought in and were able to collect over 1,200 tonnes of silt from the main carriageways. So I think that was a job well done, and it was a useful supplement to the good work that the core frontline teams do. Obviously, we have had a successful initiative with the community cleanups in 2023, and we will continue with them because they're well liked in each community. They're needed. And there's an immediate buy-in which ties into our aspirations under Take Pride in Your City campaign. Just one closing point, just to set some context and perhaps offer some reassurance to Bailey McPherson, that when you take a look at our score, it's worth bearing in mind the context of other cities and other big cities. We're at 86.2. Aberdeen is performing at 89.5. Edinburgh is 86.3. So almost identical to Dundee, and Glasgow's at 84.2. So we are actually within the family benchmark group, within the median. And we have obviously got that aspiration to continue to improve. And I think, just to be absolutely clear, because I think Bailey McPherson had asked a specific question, we have dropped our score over the last couple of years. So I think at one point we're at 92.1. So that's obviously, it shows that we can achieve that. And a challenge for me and my team is to try and get back to that as soon as possible. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Mr. Boyle. I'll not prolong this tonight. I'm aware the hour's late, and I appreciate very much that this is largely down to resources, in terms of, obviously, the more resources, the more that you can do. But I would just reiterate, I think the staff do an excellent job. They're very approachable, and I'm very grateful for that. Thanks, Mr. Boyle.
Thank you, Bailey McPherson. Next question is from Bailey Keenan.
Thanks, convener. I was wanting to ask a question about the deposit return scheme, given that it mentions that there's been a draft cost benefit model that's been developed in conjunction with Zero Waste Scotland. And I'm just wondering what information officers are able to share with us in relation to that, given that, hopefully there was going to be a cost saving and an increased amount of recycling in the city that now no longer appears to be happening for another few years yet. I thought the deposit return scheme was one of the things that were going to make a real difference to the amount of recycling that goes on within the city, and that would appear to be sort of somewhat on hold. So I wonder if officers can share the details of what the cost benefits would have been.
Thank you, Bailey Keenan. Now, my understanding from conversations with Mr. Boyle are that we anticipated that there would be savings, but we didn't factor them in a very cautious way. But I'll ask Mr. Boyle to clarify if that's the case.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Bailey. Billy Keenan. Yeah, the deposit return scheme is something that we have been looking at closely. Obviously, the situation has been changing, as we've probably all aware in the last week. We have been looking at doing some modelling around what the changes would be, and obviously that depends on what's actually in the waste stream and recycling stream that's collected. And you'll be aware, I'm sure, that there's been a debate about whether glass should be included, for example, in the future. And the latest we have guidance from the Scottish Government is that they'll in fact join the UK approach from October 2025. So officers within my team are developing modelling and a transformation model about how the future of the service will roll out. However, that can't be done in isolation. It has to be tied up to the issues that I responded to Councillor Crichton on regarding the circular economy legislation and the waste route map to 2025 beyond, because we have to be aware that some, as previously discussed at Policy and Resources Committee, I think last year, there may be some changes to the way that we undertake collections based on the guidance we're given and the legislative framework that comes from Scottish Government around the mandatory collections. For example, food waste, does that stay weekly? Can we go to fortnightly? Could we look at alternating and changing the frequency of the metals, plastics, Tetra Paks and paper and cardboard? So there's a whole range of things in the mix, and absolutely Bailey Keenan is correct in saying we had been looking at making some real advantages and savings financially for the city through that, and also allowing others to contribute and play their rightful part in recycling. So we're looking at all these things, and we will not be able to actually develop a model until such times as we get that circular economy and waste route map to 2025 detail from Scottish Government. And obviously over the course of the next 12 months, we will understand and know more as it becomes clearer about what's happening with the deposit return scheme, both nationally and within Scotland and across the UK. Oh, that's helpful, Convener.
Convener, I was just wondering, as it says there is a draft cost benefit model that's been developed. What can we use that for in the meantime? Are we able to suggest that we'll have X amount of aluminium tins, if they went through and were recycled, we'll collect that much less? So is there modelling work that is a given, and in which case then if you run that quickly through a model, then I would be able to get an understanding of what sort of savings we would have had.
My understanding is that we haven't calculated savings and we didn't put them into the budget.
I'm not asking about whether they're put into the budget. I would like to know whether they're coming up and they are available, because we all know that the pressures that local government are under by way of settlement. I mean, we've talked about police and fire tonight in their budget, never mind our own.
Yeah. Mr. Boyle, would you like to come back on that point about future modelling and...
Yeah, certainly, Convener, and thanks again, Bailey Keenan. Yeah, that refers to specific work that's been undertaken by Zero Waste Scotland and the Scottish Government's Zero Waste team. We have got officers liaising with the team there to try and get some of that information, which will help to inform what happens at a kind of local Dundee level. I know that, for example, the Scottish Government's modelling has looked at over 2 billion receptacles coming out of the waste stream. So you can imagine the beneficial consequential impacts of that. But just referring again to what I said a second ago, but there are other things coming along the pipeline regarding the legislative framework, which may alter what we need to do. And Convener, you were right in what you'd said earlier on, in that other local authorities have perhaps develop some modelling ahead of DRS coming in. We've not done that because we're taking a careful watch and brief on this, but we will come up, as Bailey Keenan has alluded to, we are starting to develop ideas, and as soon as we've got something that we can put some flesh on the bone towards, we'll bring that to a future committee.
And we will be reviewing the waste strategy.
Convener, if I could maybe ask another question then, if officers are able to provide me with the modelling that other councils have done, it would give me an indication of what would be available for us. Thank you.
We can take that up with Mr. Boyle directly. We've got one more question from Councillor McHugh.
Thank you,
Dorothy.
convener. I have a wee comment and then a question, if that's permissible. My comment relates to page 13 of the bundle, or no, of this report, under service priorities. And in the bullet points down at the bottom of the page, the one on improving housing, the housing quality of social housing, refers to the elderly. Can I just say words matter, and could we in future use older people as a phrase going forward, please?
That is a very fair comment. Yes, we can amend that. Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you. Every meeting I go to, every committee I sit on, I'm very aware of how older people are spoken about. My question relates to the performance indicators in the final outcome report, page 29. And this report provides a snapshot on a specific date, I think March 23. There are 23 performance indicators listed in the report, and 9 relate directly to housing. And of these 9, 3 have a green tick and 6 are coded red. These performance scores very much mirror my growing caseload from constituents, struggling to achieve that quality of life that is listed as a key priority for neighbourhood services. The report shows unacceptable performance in reactive and non-emergency repairs, in the number of days to relet properties, in lets to homeless households, in gross rent arrears and rent lost through voids. And all of these impact negatively on our tenants and on our wider communities. So my question is this a trend or a spike? Is our performance improving or worsening? And if the position is worsening, what are the specific actions proposed to address and remedy these shortfalls?
Councillor Hugh, the calculation you reported there is exactly the one I did when I first saw the report. I will bring in the officers to respond to these questions, but I know that some of these percentages are still being distorted because of the lag. So as we complete a job that's been outstanding because it was affected by COVID, the average percentage increases because we finished the job. So it's presenting a more negative situation than reality. But I'll bring Elaine Svirling in at this point and to respond to the questions, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Heather, but I think the point of my question is a trend would be useful, to see a trend rather than a snapshot, because a snapshot can be complicated, by
and as you know,
things.
we do have the opportunity in the best value report to at least look at those trends. But so there's maybe more time to discuss that, whereas this report is just on the numbers. So I'd bring in Elaine Svirling to perhaps respond to some of your comments about whether it's getting better or.
Thank you very much, convener, and thank you, Councillor McHugh, for your questions. Absolutely, this is a snapshot in time and reflects the performance, previous performance, but certainly there's a lot of work going into improving this performance. And as the convener has highlighted, in some areas, for example, response repairs, only once that repair is complete do those days count, and therefore there is a time lag in terms of performance, but it's not a true representation of where we're at this point in time. The Housing Best Value Review Group was set up so that we could look at trends and look at information in more detail, and we will certainly be reporting information through that means to demonstrate that there's a lot of work going into improving performance right across all of these indicators, not just in terms of response repairs, but also in terms of relets and lets to homeless applicants as well. So we'll certainly be reporting that back through the Housing Best Value Review Group going forward. But there is a lot of effort going into turning some of these indicators around, and I hope we can demonstrate that to you when we report to the next quarter of the Housing Best Value Group.
Could I come back, Heather?
Very briefly.
I understand that these trends will come to the Housing Best Value Review Group, but I do think it's important for councillors to be aware of the trends going forward. And just Heather suggested you might be able to answer me. Is the position worsening or improving over time?
Well, I think that overall there is an improvement. You know, there are pressures in the system, most definitely, particularly around homelessness. We are starting to see increases in demand for homeless accommodation. So that is always a challenge to us. So, but certainly we are starting to see improvements both in terms of our relet performance in our response repairs and also our response to homeless applicants. But again, I have to say that with the caveat that there's a lot of pressure in the system, particularly around homelessness, and that situation is dynamic and can change. But I'm very confident that with the work that's going in right across the partnership, we are starting to see improvements right across the board. And indeed, particularly in our affordable housing supply, we were starting to see significant traction in new build properties, so we'll be able to report on that as well through the Housing Best Value Review Group. I don't know if Louise wants to add anything to what I said.
No, I think you've covered that, Elaine. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank the team for, I mean, it's a completely packed and full report covering the range of services that are delivered to neighbourhood services. We're very conscious of the enormous pressures on housing at the moment with Ukrainian displaced persons, increases in homelessness. The service is under a lot of pressure, but I can testify to the enormous amount of work that the team are doing to try and stabilise the situation and recover from the long-term impacts of COVID. So I'd ask that I can't see that anyone is disagreeing with approving this report, so I'd like to recommend this for approval. Thank you. Next item, Veronica.
Thank you, Convener. Item number 4, review of Dundee's scheme for the establishment of community councils. This report is for your approval.
So essentially, the last time this scheme was reviewed was back in 2010. At this point, we are not asking you to approve the recommendations in the report. We're simply asking the committee to approve the initiation of a consultation process on these proposals. The consultation will take place over nine months to a year, and there'll be a series of progress reports coming back to Neighbourhood Services Committee as detailed on page 39. So I'm asking if the committee are happy to initiate the statutory consultation period. Now I see 2 questions, so I'll take them now. Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, Convener. It's just a comment with regards to the information 4.2.3 concerning the West End and Blackness/Ancram. Billy McPherson and I have long argued that the West End Community Council boundaries should cover the whole of our ward, especially given the folding of the Community Spirit Action Group that used to cover the North End of our ward. So very pleased that this has been taken on board, and the Community Council will certainly also welcome it.
But hopefully we'll participate in the consultation fully and frankly. Thank you. Councillor Cruikshank.
Thank you, Convener. I would just like to say I had a very useful briefing with Nikki McCrimmon, can I say second? McCrimmon. And yeah, it was very useful. But there was one thing that stood out to me, that it's the West End and Broughty Ferry who claim the administration fee and none the other ones. And I questioned Nikki at the time, and can we ensure that other community councils or forums are alerted to the fact that they can claim these administrative costs? And it'd be useful for us as councillors to know what the procedure is for that.
Nikki, can I bring you in to respond?
Yeah, so Councillor Cruikshank, since we spoke, I've written out to all of the neighbourhood representative structures and community councils to remind them that they are entitled to their administration grant. As you can see from the report, prior to COVID, we'd had an uptick in that, having written to them before, and then when COVID hit, people stopped meeting and people stopped claiming their admin grant, and people stopping meeting is important, because what the process is that you write to Margaret Moody, who is the admin support that I have. So you write to the communities section with a copy of your last either audited or inspected accounts, and just seek to claim your grant. And then when that happens, we process that through the usual means. So you do have to be up to date on your accounts. And a lot of groups didn't meet and hold AGMs and do their accounts over COVID, which is why it slipped back again. But I've written out to, as I say, every community council and NRS, inviting them to apply again and explaining the process for doing so. So I'd anticipate we'll see an uptick in people claiming from now on.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nikki.
So I assume that the committee are happy to initiate the statutory consultation, and we'll hear how it goes. Veronica, next item.
Item number 5, purchase of bins and containers for your approval.
This is a report you will be used to seeing. It has the details about the need to purchase an annual quantity of waste and recycling bins and containers. It also confirms that refurbished containers will be used in the first instance, and that new containers will be required, but new containers will also be required. Is the committee happy to approve this report? I see no one saying to the contrary, so Tony will be very happy. He could go and spend that money. Next item, please, Veronica.
Item 6, Lawn Tennis Association Parks Investment Programme for approval.
Now, this is absolutely brilliant news. I know it's been a long night, but we're being given £110,000 by the Lawn Tennis Association to upgrade all our tennis courts. And they will also work with us to run the club's park online booking service and offer free tennis to people in Dundee at their local parks. So it is a completely, I kept saying to Tony, what is the downside here? So what we're being asked to do here is to progress to a partnership agreement between Dundee City and Tennis Scotland to support the upgrade of the pitches, take the money and proceed to the next stage of the refurbishment and do more tennis. Are people happy to welcome this partnership? I see no dissent. Oh, sorry, there might be questions. Is that Bailey McPherson?
Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, sorry.
I concur with your, this is very positive news, and I'm very pleased to welcome this. I have a question regarding ongoing maintenance. It's great to upgrade tennis courts, certainly to Lawn Tennis Association standard is absolutely excellent. Councillor Crichton and I had an issue a few weeks ago regarding the existing Victoria Park tennis courts, where over the course of a winter, to be honest, the tennis courts became pretty unplayable through leaves and silt and so on that had gathered on the tennis courts. Now, to be fair, on contacting the department, that has been attended to. But I was just really wondering if Mr. Boyle could give us some indication as to how we can ensure that upgraded facilities, that there's ongoing maintenance to ensure that they're always playable.
Mr. Boyle.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Bill McPherson. Yeah, I'm happy to confirm we'll have a dedicated programme for these tennis courts going forward, and Bill McPherson is correct to point that issue out, but we'll make sure we're on top of that in the future.
That's greatly appreciated, Mr. Boyle. Thank you.
Councillor Shears.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, it's just a comment to welcome it. I remember many years ago, I was lucky enough to spend some time in Serbia, and as you go around Serbia, there are tennis courts like this on every single street, free to use for everyone. And you look at the quality of tennis players that Serbia puts out compares to us, it's a vast difference. I'm also really pleased to see that there is a lot of promises in there for free access. So even our most disadvantaged people can use them. So I'm very happy to see this.
Good, thank you. Right, sorry, there's a comment there. Oh, you wanted that item to be last. Okay, the next item, Veronica.
Sorry, I couldn't get my microphone off there.
Sorry.
Item number 7, Biodiversity Action Plan Dundee Annual Progress Report. This is for your information.
And again, if you thought Neighbourhood Services was doing a lot, this is a subsection of Neighbourhood Services. So this is the annual report on the biodiversity plan, and Appendix 1 is a very thorough and impressive catalogue of the actions in progress over the last 12 months, and some very significant achievements are listed there. I'm not going to highlight them here because of the time, apart from saying we planted 12 hectares of climate resilient woodland and improved trotic ponds, and have improved lots of naturalised grassland. So the committee is asked to note the achievements and progress in the Biodiversity Action Plan as presented. Any comments? Everyone happy? I just want to thank the team for the enormous amount of work that they do in the background. Well done. Veronica.
And we now go to item 8. That's tenders received by Head of Design and Property for your approval.
So these are tenders for boiler replacement in Glenesk Avenue Community Complex and the Very Sheltered Complex in Craigie Street, replacement doors and screens at West March Development, concrete repairs to sills, lintels, etc. over the year, emergency demolition works that were undertaken at Bewley Avenue and Craigmore Street following the damage caused by a falling tree. I am asking for approval of these tenders, and I see no dissent, so I take it that that report is approved. Thank you very much, and that's the end of Neighbourhood Services for this evening.
Thank you, Convener. The final committee this evening is the Policy and Resources Committee.
Good evening, folks. We'll just crack on and I'll try and keep my gaze above this sunlight so I can actually see the screen. Willie?
Yeah, thanks very much, Convener. Firstly, are there any declarations of interest?
Any declarations on the items? I see no D rushing for the keyboard, so I'll take that as a no.
Okay, thank you. There being no declarations, takes you on to item 2, which is sewage discharges into Scotland's rivers and seas. This item has been placed on the agenda by Councillor Duncan and Councillor Coleman.
Can I presume it's in that order? So if I'm correct, I'll take Craig first.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Can I just ask the officers share the motion? That'd be handy.
Thank you.
And if it's okay with you, whilst you're all reading that, I'll just speak to it if I may.
Of course.
Okay, thanks, Convener. The reason that the Liberal Democrat group is bringing this issue on sewage discharges into Scotland's rivers and seas to committee is because of the justifiable concerns of people right across Scotland. You may be aware that already other local authorities have passed similar recommendations to ours. That would include, for example, our neighbours in Fife Council, where the Lib Dem group brought the issue forward and all parties' support on the matter was achieved. And I'm kind of hoping that we might go down that route tonight. As our motion alludes to, sewage was dumped at least 14,000 times across Scotland in 2022. That's actually an increase of some 30% compared to 2021, but it's a wee bit concerning that no monitoring is actually conducted in Dundee. Thankfully, we know, however, that from the blue flag process at Broughty Ferry Beach, for example, continues to fully comply with the standards and requirements for water quality analysis. But far too much of Scotland's sewage overflow points are monitored. Only 4%, in fact, are monitored, which is somewhat 144 out of 3,614. This compares to around 90%, that's 90% in England, so the actual figure in Scotland is potentially much worse. Dundee, we're actually lucky to have a pristine coast right here, however, and actually much of Scotland also, but it's important that all of our rivers should be free from pollution and that every effort should be made to avoid contamination through sewage right across Scotland. The local environment and everybody who uses all the rivers and beaches across Scotland deserve the highest possible protection, and we therefore think the calls from campaigners for every sewage dump to be properly recorded and published should be heeded. The introduction of legally binding targets for reducing these overflows, the upgrading of Scotland's ageing sewage system, an end to dumping around Scotland's best beaches, and a faster process for the protection of bathing waters. Scottish Water has belatedly said that the number of storm drain monitors in use will be increased to more than 1,000 by the end of 2024. 2024, yeah. But we need to keep the pressure on Scottish Water to actually deliver improvements, because frankly, targets don't cut it, but action will. Accordingly, we're asking that committee should request that the Chief Executive of the Council contacts both Alex Plant, that's the new Chief Executive of Scottish Water, and Marie McCallan, MSP, Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero and Just Transition, to highlight the issue and seek reassurances that the situation will improve. And Councillor Coleman will kindly second me.
Thanks very much. But as you say, I'm hoping that he probably isn't required for a seconder, but I will give him his opportunity nonetheless. Daniel?
Thank you, Mr. Convener. I'm indeed pleased to second Councillor Duncan. This is a vitally important issue across Scotland, and it's good to see other local authorities across the country already raising this and putting pressure on Scottish Water to do much more to tackle sewage discharge across the country. We feel the Scottish Government should be proactive to ensure there is recording and publishing of every sewage dump, introducing the first legally binding targets for reducing sewage dumps, the upgrade of Scotland's Victorian sewage network, a ban on dumping across Scotland's best beaches, and speeding up the protection of the bathing waters. Former frontman of the Undertones, Fergal Sharkey, now a key voice in sounding the alarm over filthy waterways across the UK, sums this issue up saying the government should now, as a matter of urgency, demand that Scottish Water roll out those monitors across the rest of the network so that the people of Scotland can all have the transparency that they are entitled to. They deserve to see exactly what impact the government and Scottish Water are having on their rivers, their environment and their beaches. Fergal Sharkey is indeed right, and I hope that committee will echo the calls and support the motion before us tonight. Thank you, Mr. Convener.
Thank you very much, both, for your brevity. I'm certainly happy. There's only one part which I'm not willing to die in a ditch about that I would perhaps suggest is preempting the results of any study where it says that it will undoubtedly be worse. I'm an eternal optimist and would hope it wouldn't be. But again, the thrust of what you're proposing is perfectly reasonable. And I think the story of water in the river in Dundee's history is an important one. They are, of course, intertwined. And you've rightly celebrated the recent celebration, I suppose, of Broughty Ferry's status, and the fact that we have dolphins on the river is a good suggestion of the health of the river. But of course, we can't be complacent. So I'm certainly happy to support that. Are there any dissenting voices? I see no other contributions, so we will take that as agreed. Thank you both very much. Willie, we'll move on to the next item.
Thank you. Takes on to item 3, budget investment proposals tackling social inequality. You're asked to agree the recommendations.
I'm obviously very pleased to bring these forward with some additional detail as a result of the administration's budget proposals that were obviously considered a few months back. The detail in here, I think, are certainly areas and issues and a focus that we would all endorse. Clearly, the £500,000 of support for our food banks and our food network generally is to be welcomed. But of course, again, as I've already said, in a different context, we can't be complacent with these things. We know that the money isn't going as far now because each of those items that are purchased for our food banks and members of the food network is more expensive. So that means money doesn't go as far as it once did. And that's a challenge and something that we need to continue to scrutinise and work and support. There's also additional funding allocated for some of the individual projects, and I think it's worth name checking a couple of those, particularly the Anxiety in Motion, or AIM project as it's commonly referred to. I've had the pleasure of visiting that project previously and was really impressed at what it does and how it engages with young people who have ultimately disengaged from their school, and to work with them. And this funding will allow them greater access and support, I suppose, to the curriculum, and I think that's really important. So I commend this to committee. I think, again, I hope it will be broadly welcomed in terms of how this funding is being allocated, and nearly £1 million of expenditure being targeted in this way, I think, is a really important signal of how committed we are, both as an administration and as a council, to social justice. And again, hopefully we can continue to invest as we've done in recent years in these areas. Is there any questions on this? I see nobody typing at the moment, so can I take this as agreed? Thank you very much. We'll move on. Willie?
Okay, thank you. Takes on to item 4, purchase of enterprise backup system. You're asked to give the proposals.
Again, I'm sure some of your understanding of all these systems is better than my own, but fairly self-explanatory, I hope. Are there any questions for officers on this item? No, everybody happy to sign off the agreement? Okay, thank you very much. And Willie, by my reckoning, that's one of the shortest P&Rs we've had, and we have finished just ahead of time. So thank you all for your participation, your contributions, and your stamina. Have a good night. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.